Good day to you, and a very warm welcome from myself, Tim Hutchings, and Coach Matt Seddon to the Warandeloop cross-country meeting of 2023. We're in the forests to the southwest of the city of Tilburg in the Netherlands, about 70 kilometers northeast of Antwerp. It's a cool winter morning. It's a heavy frost around much of northern Europe. And Tilburg, well, of course, like the Netherlands, very, very flat. The loop, though, here is twisting and turning through the forests, the main loop of 1,875 meters. It will test the athletes' concentration, certainly in the longer races where they cover lap after lap. And we've got 6 races coming at you over the next 2.5 hours, starting off with the under-20 men who get underway in about 3 minutes' time. There's 67 entries for that race. It's a meeting which goes back to 1956. It's been held just about every year, with just 2 or 3 years been missed for various reasons since. It's one of the great cross-country gatherings of Northern Europe, and the Low Countries, of course, have a strong tradition in European cross-country championships. Spa European cross-country championships are 2 weeks today in the centre of Brussels. We look forward to fabulous racing there for the Continental Championships. But a great deal to look forward to over these next couple of hours. Let me just tell you that it's the under-20 men, followed by the under-20 women, then the senior and under-23 men, senior and under-23 women, and the 2 short course races, men first and then the women. Matt, the weather looks, well, if it's not gloriously warm and sunny, it's good old cross-country weather, isn't it?
Certainly is, Tim. I made a quick note of the weather before we came on air. What is it, 6 degrees out there, 10 kilometres an hour winds. Not that the winds will affect things too much. We just saw that course preview. Super technical here in Tilburg. Very firm underfoot as well. And Tim, not very many passing spots out there.
No, there aren't. Although I guess the athletes will pick their moments, and there are wider sections where passing is possible. Of course, the Netherlands is one of the epicenters of European athletics, indoor athletics, outdoor athletics on the track, and cross-country racing as well. And you can throw in a bit of road racing as well, with the big marathons in Amsterdam and Rotterdam and other cities too of the Netherlands, where things are done well. And this race is being done well. Over 250 volunteers helping out through the year with this gathering, and the local primary and secondary schools and universities, students assisting as well. We're in the grounds of, partly in the grounds of Tilburg University. So it is a real coming together of so many different forces, including the local authority in this Dutch city. There's an idea of the main loop being used for most of the races. It's 1,875 meters, and they're at the lineup for this junior men's race, or under 20 men, as we're supposed to call it these days. The women under 18 has actually already happened. That, as you can see, is men under 20 with their engines revving.
We are indeed 6.2 kilometres ahead of them, so they're going to do one very small lap, Tim, of just 500 or so metres before they embark on 3 larger laps of just under 2 kilometres to total up that 6.2k course. We'll let the starter get things underway. A few names to look out for. Ian Lobles, 8th in the European Under-20 champs over the 1500 in the summer, Tim, 3:43, 1500. And that really is kind of, you know, nearing the top in Europe over 1500. If you're down low 340s over 1500, you're one of the better runners in Europe. And so interested to see what he could do here. He'll be looking probably the favourite here. He's going to wear number 506. He'll be looking for a win and to bid his spot at the European Championships in 2 weeks, as you already mentioned, over in Brussels.
Under starters' orders then. The gun is up, as they say. And they are racing here in the higher category races. It's a 3-day meeting of cross-country running, by the way. It's a real festival. Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And all ages and categories catered for. But this, the front end at least, will be the fiercest and fastest yet, as these youngsters get underway. As Matt says, when you've run down towards 3:42, 3:43 for 1,500 meters, that would be equivalent to a 4-minute mile. And there's quite a few lads in this race who have broken 3:50 for 1,500 meters, which obviously equates to something between 4 minutes and 4:07 for a mile. It is, in the main, quite good going underfoot too. A lot of people say cross-country should test more skills than just a flat race that you can find on the roads or the track almost any day of the week somewhere. I'm a traditionalist, I have to admit. I prefer to see hills and lumps and bumps and twists and turns and surface changes as well. And I think there's a reasonable mix of that here today, Matt, as we see the leaders head off through the trees. And it's good to see, Matt, no quarter being given. This is quick from the gun.
I thought it would be, Tim. It needed to be quick, to be honest. I said, before the race started, it's a very narrow course. It's just, the start, there we are, a quick replay, but it narrows, it bottlenecks very, very quickly, and these gentlemen will be scrapping for position. I think once you get ahead of runners, you can kind of relax, you can run your rhythm, and there's not many places to overtake. Here we are, we're getting some 500-meter splits through already, so around about 1:23 for that first 500, which is pretty good going. So that shows, just outside sort of 4-minute 1500-meter pace for those of you watching. So a fast start as we expected, firm underfoot. Tim, we were kind of talking, you could almost get away with your trainers, but it looks just a little bit slippy, a little bit muddy to be wearing trainers out here today. So I think, but certainly 6mm spikes will be on foot for these gentlemen.
No, absolutely right. I saw 5:20 there leading away. That's Joachim Wiersma of the Netherlands. It is exclusively Dutch field. There's an Austrian competitor and a Spaniard, and a few Belgians have come across for this race. And the tempo, of course, very different at the back to the front end. When you're in your teens, your mid-teens and your late teens, every season makes such a huge difference in training. I mean, you probably remember well yourself, Matt, as having been a good runner. It's you're a very different athlete at 16 to what you were the previous year at 15, and so on. I found massive changes in strength and ability just through accumulation of training, and of course the obvious gaining of age.
Oh, absolutely. I think, these gentlemen, they won't set any limits on themselves at this age because, you can be a 14:30, 5,000 meter runner one year, and the following year you can almost be a 13:30 runner. You see those sorts of jumps in this age group, especially as they transition to seniors. They might get a little bit of funding. They might sign with a sponsor as well at that age. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop. And you're right, there are a few Belgians in here, Tim. They had their teams is already selected actually for those European Championships in Brussels on home soil. So perhaps just a good hard run out for them to replicate what they're going to be doing in 2 weeks' time.
No, absolutely right. I think a lot of coaches would say, look, you've been training hard. You're going to have a good hard run out over 6 kilometers, which is not overstretching things. Many of these junior men will be used to running 15 or 20 kilometers on a Sunday morning for their long run normally. So 6K for them is almost under distance, really, as a test of racing. I mean, it's going to be about 20 minutes of hard running. Saw that Joachim Wiersma, who's had his 15 seconds of fame. He's dropped back a little bit now. He's back in about 15th place as they come through now. And, they're being well stretched here, almost single file with only 4 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, Tim, it looks like that's Juan Zilderland up front, 511 there in the black and the headband, easy to spot for us. You talk about 6 kilometers being under distance. I mean, he's already got a 10K, road 10K PB to his name of just outside 30 minutes, so 30 minutes and 20 seconds. That kind of shows his strength. There won't be many men in this field who would have experienced a kind of hard 10K like that on the roads, but Zilderland, he certainly has, and he's one of the quickest over 5,000 as well with 14:02. So already to the fore in this race and looking to push things on, and we're probably coming up to that mile split anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm just checking his card, Matt. He's run 8:06 for 3,000, which is really tasty running, actually. For a junior, that is quick. Anything under 8:20 is pretty useful for 3,000 meters. That's 7.5 laps of your track. It's the sort of metric version of 2 miles, I suppose. And these logs they're skipping over now, well, they're not exactly a massive barrier, but they just break up your rhythm, don't they? It's what makes the difference between this and track racing. One of the differences, it's almost akin to a steeplechase, I suppose, which is... I never did run one, but it's harder than it looks, I think, the steeplechase. It's all very well to say, well, it's just another 3,000 meter race, but when you've got all those barriers every lap, it's a massive test of strength and concentration.
Yeah, I think those logs are going to be
appearing already, Matt. Sorry.
They are indeed. I was going to say those logs are going to be a factor late on in the race, Tim. You see how they approach them. It's a real tight turn before they approach those logs. So it doesn't give athletes, much time to kind of get into position and eye them up, if you like. So they just kind of thrown on them almost. So I think, we could see them be a factor late on in this race. But, we said before, 6K of running. I mean, they're a quarter of the way through already, probably more than. They're going to be around about 18 minutes, you would have thought, the pace these men can operate at. So Zilderland just looks to be enjoying the turns. Timmy's just accelerating and decelerating out of them. There's the one kind of flat open section of the course back into the woods. You can see him just kind of deal with those few bumps. They call it undulations, Tim. I know you almost scoffed at that. They're much more kind of just little mounds, aren't they? You have to just work your arms, short strides to get up them and off.
Well, it is the Netherlands, so we can't demand that they build big hills. But yeah, those undulations we just saw him negotiating really smoothly do have their effect, a cumulative effect, I suppose you could say. And of course, this surface, a little bit muddy in one or two places, very, very different in its demands to track racing, as we see the top 15 or so coming through. And he has really asked a lot of questions early on. There you go, lap to 6:45, and he's got a couple of seconds lead over three athletes, Lievens, Lobeles, and Lievens, Matisse Lievens, Casper and Matisse. I am assuming brothers, with Mick Wilverkamp back in 5th place. So good running from Zaidalan as he really tests this field.
He is testing it. He's stretching out. That is Lobeles behind Tim, and he's the one with the faster 1500 meter PB. You compare that to Zilderland's personal best of 3:49. Okay, he's a good 5,000 meter runner, but over 6K, can Lobeles just keep him in sight? That's a 10 meter gap there, and he's got a much faster 1500. So expect, on this terrain as well, there's no excuse for not having a good kind of turnover towards the end of the race. It's not particularly muddy. It's almost like a track out there. So if he is in contention late on in a couple laps time, it's going to be an interesting sprint finish, because he's just working his way up. A little bit more of a measured effort from Lobeles. He's in the purple for those of you at home watching this, in 2nd place. But this is a flashback to earlier on, I believe, just on that first lap, negotiating the logs there.
Yeah, I always like that challenge between the front runners who are not as confident of their sprint finish as others. And they're sort of not one-trick pony qualities, but if you haven't got a great kick finish and you're strong, then of course the obvious tactic is to go out hard early on and test the others and try and take the sting out of them. And you're right, Matt, that if the quicker athlete Lobeles can hang in there within a few seconds of Zaidalan, then he has a chance about kicking him over the final stages. It's the sort of course where you can muscle up a sort of head of steam, I suppose, in the last 500 meters or so, and make up a pretty good gap if you finish strongly with the last 400 meters on this sort of surface, quite regularly, I would imagine, being covered in less than 60 seconds. So can Zaidalan to continue the pressure and ease that gap apart between himself and Lobeles, and sort of break that psychological link between the two, physical link as well? Because if you've got somebody, Matt, 20 or 30 meters ahead of you, they're still in your psychological target sight line, aren't they? But if once it becomes 40, 50 meters, then they're gone.
Do you know what, Tim? It seems every time we get to the twisty section that Zaidalan seems to enjoy it. He seems to be able to kind of ease away from Lobeles. I think Lobeles, that track speed, that track style, that kind of long loping stride, he's not enjoying those short, sharp turns as much, those little mounds. So Zaidalan kind of pulls away, and it looks like Lobeles has now got a bit of company with those two twins, Matisse Lievens and Casper Lievens as well. Believe it or not, Tim, they've both got equal PBs over 1,500. They're the two lads in the green that you can see on screen. And they both went to the European Championships representing Belgium, the European Under-20 Championships. That was this summer out in Jerusalem. One in the 1,500, Casper in the 1,500, and Matisse over the 3,000. So both pretty decent runs out there. 10th or so for Matisse. But they're keeping Lobeles company late on in this race.
Well, I've lost picture at my end, Matt, temporarily, so you'll have to keep going with this race. I had pictures fine a minute ago, but I've lost pictures here, so I'm going to leave it to you. But it is building nicely. Now I've got them back, and it is still, as we can see, Zaidalan leading. And that is becoming a significant lead. It was just a couple of seconds, but he's worked hard for this, Matt, mid-race, 10 minutes on the clock. And I love to see front runners getting the reward for their efforts. I like to see gutsy. It's distance racing, and therefore I like to see the whole distance race, not a tactical sort of stumbling, meandering affair with a hard last 10% or whatever.
Yeah,
Call me a traditionalist.
He certainly seems to be kind of tiptoeing his way through this course. He's super light on his feet as well. He just, out of everyone up front now, he's negotiating the turns best. I mean, he skipped over these logs. So a lot of the athletes are actually negotiating these logs very, very well. But this is the chance Lobles has to really work back at Zuiderland. He can see him. He's in sight there. And if he wants to kind of close that gap and be in contention going into that final lap, he's going to have to work hard on this section of the course, because when it gets twisty, Zuiderland just eases his way every single time, and you can see so relaxed. Little stumble there on the turn, was it? But just drifting through the spectators as they enjoy this these short laps, Tim. They always makes it exciting for spectators, having sort of 5 or 6 lap cross-country races, opposed to, you know, the old traditional. We talk about traditional cross-country. Well, off you go for 12 kilometers, and the crowd don't get to see much of you until you come back in sort of, 35 minutes later or so.
Well, he's got a 9-second lead, I counted just now, Matt. So I think he's got this one. Barring disaster, he's going really well. And yet, multi-lap races are very much the norm these days, aren't they? Even in marathons, major championship marathons. I mean, you're dead right. Who wants to, unless you're talking about the New York Marathon or London Marathon or some point-to-point circuitous loop even, but just one, the road's covered just once, or the circuit covered just once. People want spectators. Want to see athletes coming past several times, and I love it. I love these major city marathons now, the championship marathons, where they run 3 or 4 laps. Let's go back to the London Olympics. I mean, the crowds were monstrous. They're running through a tunnel of people all the time, and this is nice too. The spectators here get to see these lads 3 or 4 times during the race. But there you can see Matisse Levens.
That's incorrect, Tim. That's certainly incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say.
Yeah, no.
It's not Matisse Levens, is it? We know that's Juan Zuiderland. There we go, 5-1-1.
Yeah, still Zuiderland up front, and I think it may well be Levens who's moved ahead of Lobles, but from our images, it didn't look like it. Lobles in the purple, Levens in the green, so I would just ignore the graphic on the bottom left of screen at the moment. It gives us some indication a little bit further down the field how people are getting on. You can kind of look at the gaps, look at the margins there. But you could see Matisse and Johan Lobles have actually broken Levens' brother and Casper just 3 or 4 seconds adrift of his twin brother, Tim.
Yeah, 5.56. That's Matteo Schur. He's a 3:56, 1500 fella. But of course, with his best at 3,828, you compare that with the 8:06 of Zuiderland, and that is why Zuiderland is operating, frankly, at a different level now. And then that's a different level to most of this field. His lead is about 10 seconds, and he's dominated this one. It's been a brave, gutsy run just to go out hard and say to the others, catch me if you can. And he's got his answer long before the finish, Matt, on this final lap now. He's away.
These are fantastic images as we just watch them weave and wind through the forest here. Still got eyes on Matteo Schur, running quite isolated on his own at this point. This is where you really have to focus. But back to Zuiderland up front. And Tim, for the first time, it looks like Lobles looks to be struggling back in 3rd place as well. So the Dutchman, the Belgian, Matisse Levens just edging ahead of Lobles there as they come past shot.
Yeah, the gaps have really opened up, haven't they, through this second half now. It's funny, isn't it? Because if you go out hard and you can break away in a distance race like this, as we see Zuiderland go through there, left of picture, as they've negotiated this loop that's sort of beyond those bushes in the center of our screen, then you know that everybody behind you, chasing hard, is redlining. And you're not redlining yet necessarily. You can judge your effort and judge your effort according to them. And you know, the course like this, Matt, gives you plenty of opportunities to glance over your shoulder and look across at corners and see what's going on behind. And you can gauge the damage you're doing to your competitors.
Absolutely. I mean, those gaps are getting quite big as well. So any feedback they're getting on the course, you mentioned kind of check it back over your shoulder on these turns. This is a good spot for these gentlemen to do that, actually, because they can kind of breathe and Of course, they can look across the track just opposite as those guys will, loop around. It's a very small circuit. They're just going to loop around here to the right of picture. I think they take a left turn and come back on themselves. It's an extra 50 meters or so. But Zuiderland, well clear, Tim, and he's going to be approaching the finish now. I said we're expected to see a finish time of anything around about just outside 18 minutes, 18, 19 minutes. Usually this race won right around there. You could do the math. 3-minute Ks is awfully fast on this sort of terrain. With these, it's good underfoot, Tim, but it is twisty, it is turning. And it is hard to kind of accelerate and decelerate and hold a good rhythm on this sort of course.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, the majority of the corners, Matt, are very gentle corners. You can lean into them almost like indoor track running, like there. That's one of the sharper ones. And if there's a tree in the way, then you can't lean in for danger of getting knocked out. But he's got that gap now, and he can cruise, frankly, and enjoy this final lap. About 16 and a half minutes on the clock. And Zuiderland, as has been the case for the last couple of laps, is safe now, barring disaster, tripping over a log or anything else, as these other fellas have their own little battle for the minor places.
Yeah, skipping over these logs. I was just looking around about 6.5 minutes a lap for just under 2 kilometers on this twisty course. So we can expect him to see him come through into the finish in just a few minutes' time. He's going to get back onto that nice wide straight and he can enjoy. Here we are then. That's the straight I'm talking about. And he'll be able to check his shoulder. The bike's clearing the way in front. Crowd, friends and family on the course for him. This is a fantastic victory for him. And he's going to be excited, Tim. This could be someone that you're going to see in 2 weeks' time feature at that European Cross Country Championships in that under-20 category. Quite wide open at the moment. A few of the big names, Nick Griggs, Will Barnico, those were the guys who featured last year, of course. They're going to move out of that age group. They're going to be under 23s this year. So we could be looking at Zuiderland, a future medalist over the country at the European Championships.
No, exactly right. The British had their championships yesterday up at Liverpool. Teams will be selected from that. They dominated in the under-20 race last year in Turin. And what was a fascinating course. Took the athletes actually inside and through a museum building at the top of a hill. It was testing in so many different ways. But the course in Brussels, well, I'm sure the Belgians know full well how to set out a good testing traditional cross-country course. But you're right. This lad, Juan Zuiderland, with his good 1,500 speed, his good 3,000 meter strength, and even 10k strength, he's knocking on the door, breaking 30 minutes. Little glance across there to see what's going on behind him. He has operated at a different level today, and that level, you're right, may take him to a medal come those European Championships in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks today in Brussels.
The most exciting thing about this young gentleman, Tim, is he's just 18 years of age, so he's going to have a couple more years in this under-20 age group as well. And there he is. Well, we've seen some future stars before. I mean, we know Neil Laros is a fantastic runner, but Zuiderland then is looking to become the next big thing in Dutch distance running.
And Matthijs Lievens takes second place. Great running from him. Not so far down come the finish. 18:25, the winning time for Zuiderland. And 5:06 coming through. Jan Lobles takes third place. That is very impressive running indeed, in particular from Zuiderland. The gap's surprisingly big in a way, considering it was, just 18 minutes of running. But that's really down, I suppose, Matt, to the aggressive running of Zuiderland, who made sure it was a real test from the gun.
Did indeed. I think it's easy for those gaps to open up on this course as well, Tim. It's almost like out of sight, out of mind. There's so many twists and turns. You forget where your opposition are, forget how far ahead they are. You can't really gauge that gap. You can't hold, that distance in front. So I think he was able to kind of creep away, sneak away from Matthijs Lievens a little bit easier than he perhaps originally thought. But strong run from Jan Lobles there in third as well. 1,500 meter specialist, Tim. He might not have enjoyed the country quite as much as those summer track nights, but a strong performance, no doubt.
No, absolutely. Just confirming those first three for you. Zuiderland 18:25. His winning margin at the finish, as there was a bit more winding up going on behind. Matthijs Lievens 9 seconds down, and Jan Lobles a further 9 seconds back in third place. That was the 1, 2, 3. The Netherlands, Belgium and France taking 1, 2, 3 to just underline the international nature of these higher quality races that are the climax of these 3 days of running. And he played it up to the crowd too, didn't he? Great running, and he earned it. Warandeloop was punching the air a couple of 100 meters back, and he enjoys this jaunt to the finish line, arms wide, and quite a cool customer actually. The old headband, the arm sleeves, and looking like he knew that was coming there. No hint of a smile, just a very, very accomplished run.
Cool, calm and collected. I mean, I'm sure he did his research before the race, just like we did. And on paper, he certainly was the one to watch, wasn't he? But Tim, interestingly, this is the first time we've seen this finishing straight today. And it really does kind of spring on these athletes, doesn't it? It almost comes out of nowhere. It's not a very long straight either. So if you are going to have a sprint finish battle, you've got to be on someone's coattails in those woods on that twisty section, because you haven't got much room to really make up any ground on that finishing straight.
No, you're right. And I mean, that's a shame in a way, because although the athletes will all know that, where they take that left-hand turn and appear in the background there with about 60 meters to run, I always like a home straight of 100, 150 meters. So you can get athletes, you can see sprint battles going on for 10 or 15 seconds. The athletes get an idea of where the finish is and can really enjoy it. Confirmation, though, of that win in the men's under 20 races in the Warandeloop 2023 gathering for cross-country. Warandeloop winning very comfortably there in 18.25, a 9-second gap to Matisse Levens in second place. And in third place, the Frenchman Jan Lobles with his 3:43 1,500 meter speed being nicely topped up with good strong running over the distance here, some 6.2 kilometers.
And we're going to continue to watch these under 20 men flood into the finish line. Somewhat just under 70 entries are going to come across this line. But we do have the under 20 women up next as well. They're going to just run over 4.3 kilometers. That's off at 12:27. So just under 5 minutes or so, Tim. But perhaps now quite a nice time to talk about Dutch distance running in general, Tim, because I think since the rise of Safan Hassan, we're starting to see more and more kind of Dutch distance runners come to the fore. I mean, I mentioned Neil Laros just in the climax of that under 20 race, still an under 20 himself, running 3:31 or something ridiculous for 1,500. And there's plenty more of them. You look at the European Junior Championships, they all seem to be featuring and wanting a piece of the action.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. I think, and success begets success. So the athletes like Niels Laros will be inspiring youngsters coming through. And actually, funnily enough, this sort of age group, the 16 to 18-year-old lads, 19-year-old lads who, need to look up and see somebody in their national colours at major championships, ideally the Worlds or Olympics, but if it's Europeans, that's great. And so they can say to themselves, well, that could be me. If he can do it, why not me? It's the same if you even go to nations with small populations like Croatia and so on, Serbia, you name it, great tennis players like Djokovic. There'll be kids out in their thousands on the tennis courts of those nations, having watched the success of their superstars in tennis. And the same applies to any sport. It's great to have these sort of mentors and heroes just ahead of you.
Oh, it certainly is. Well, we're going to get warmed up for this women's under 20 race there. This is a little promo of that European Championships in Brussels. I mean, Tim, that course is famous over the years, isn't it? Was it last held there in around about 2005 or something? A fantastic course, and often they host that Lotto Cross Cup, which is usually, I think, the weekend after the European Championships, that last weekend before Christmas. So I wonder if they'll be doing that again this year, but a historic cross-country venue regardless.
No, absolutely right. We saw the atomium in the background, that massive silver structure representing the atom, and of course it's only a stone's throw from the stadium in Brussels where the Diamond League meeting is held every September, and the European Athletics Indoor Championships are in Apeldoorn in a couple of years' time. Well, I say a couple of years, probably in about 15 months, something like that. And indoor athletics, well, it was picked up this last, 10 or 15 years, I suppose, Matt. It used to be very much a second thought for the majority of world-class athletics performers, whether in the field or on the track. But it's just become almost a sport with its own status, its own respected specialists now. Although a lot of the athletes, I don't know how, managed to accommodate both indoor and outdoor track seasons. And by the same token, Matt, it means a lot of track athletes, compared with probably 25, 30 years ago, don't do cross country. They turn their backs on cross country. They're away training right now or at altitude, and cross country just doesn't feature for them.
I think the calendar's changed a little bit as well, Tim. You look at the cross-country calendar. I mean, we've got the fantastic World Tour event on today as well here in Tilburg, and there's several more of them, earlier on this winter. But it seems to me, Tim, that post-Christmas, into the new year, there's not as many cross-country races, and so athletes just choose to go indoors. And I think the World Cross Country going, once every 2 years instead of every year, it just kind of discouraged people to stick around and do cross country races post Christmas and start preparing for the indoor circuit. I think on top of that as well, you look at the indoors now, it's a chance for athletes to get that time under their belt. The times have got so quick, those selection times, so they look to kind of run fast indoors and get ready for outdoors. As the European Championships is just 7th of June, so very, very early.
I know, really early. No, you're right. And there's the under 20 women about to get underway. But yes, the indoor season of the USA, mostly pre-Christmas or pre the end of January, is pretty much the cross-country season, rather, pre-Christmas, is mirrored now on the European circuit. And back in the day, the World Cross Country Championships was always end of March. Well, this is major, high-quality cross-country racing in November in Europe. This is the new era, so to speak. I say new era. It's been around for 15 or 20 years. But the under-20 women, Matt, getting underway, and a similar-sized field.
Similar size, perhaps a little bit smaller, but just, one thing that is the same is that aggressive start. They appreciate that it narrows quite quickly on this course. You want to find your position. And, Zonderland in that latest race, in that last race, Tim, he just eased away from the field pretty much from gun to tape. I wonder if we're going to see any of these women do the same thing. I think this course gives you the opportunity to do that as well. You can kind of get to the front, control the race, dictate it for those early laps as well. So a few names to look out for. Charlotte Penneman as well, another Belgian. So she'll be looking forward to the European Cross Country Champs in 2 weeks' time. She's a 4:26 1500 meter athlete and 16:30 for 5,000 meters. So that seems to be a pretty good time for these women on a European level, Tim.
No, absolutely. For junior women, anything down towards 16 minutes is good racing. And already the gaps appearing, or at least the field stretching out. It's sort of inevitable, Matt, isn't it? Because that short start straight, rather like the short finish straight, it's a bit shorter than I think would be ideal, but that short start straight has them being bottled into quite a narrow space very early on, and they have to sort out their positions within the first 30 or 40 seconds, and that means some athletes having to accept being shunted towards the back of the lead group within less than a minute of racing.
And there's not many room, there's not much room at all for overtaking. So if you do get stuck behind anyone, you could be stuck there for almost a whole lap until it opens up again. But there you are. There's lap one. This is the very small lap, the 500 meter lap. Looks like we've got a small graphic of, you can see how tight it is, Tim. I mean, almost 10 athletes a second apart there, isn't it? But Skipperin up front at the moment, just inside that 1:20 for that first lap. So similar running to their male counterparts, just a race to go. So that highlights the aggressive start out there.
Yeah, Dion Skipperin leading well. This group of about 5 or 6 just beginning to ease away. And of course, female Dutch athletes have their inspiration in the success of several massive Dutch stars, particularly in the sprints and 400 meters. And I suppose Sifan Hassan has been quite some inspiration to a lot of these youngsters for many years now. Matt, supremely consistent at 1,500 through to 10,000. Of course, she lifted the world titles at both those distances back in 2019. A unique double. And I would like to think that many of these young women thinking, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And it's not only a case of having a mentor psychologically, Matt, but also being able to look at the training of these major stars as well. That's a massive part of it. You know full well as a coach that, you never know everything. You never stop studying what's creating success for others.
Absolutely. Skipperin, someone that we should certainly keep an eye on. I think that's her in the bright yellow vest. Tim, studied out in America. in that NCAA collegiate system. So experienced racer and experienced over the cross country as well, because we know their cross country is very, very fast. It's golf course-esque, isn't it? So a little bit similar to the footing here today, you would expect. But she's a 4:26 1500 meter runner. But Tim, it looks a little bit more bunched up in that men's race just moments ago before the women.
Yeah, I know. It's looking interesting, isn't it? If we have a pack like this, and they're only racing, remember, over 4,300 meters, it's about 2/3 of the men's distance. One small lap, which they covered in about 75 seconds, then 2 large laps. And on the first of those 2 large laps already, 4 minutes on the clock now. And that lead women's pack, I suppose, if it had been broken up in the first 4 minutes, Matt, that would have been very aggressive running from the front end. And perhaps it underlines how great the running was from the winner of the men's race, Juan Zeidelan.
I think it certainly does. So just to clarify, 1 small lap, which they've already done, and then they embark on their 2 yellow laps, which are just under 2 kilometers, 1,875 meters to be precise. And so they are on lap 2 at the moment, these women. And we should get some images back up towards the front of this race in just a moment or so's time. But there's a good international mix in this race, Tim. We got Julia Navarro as well of Spain. She's a 4:26 1500 runner, 4th at those Spanish championships last summer as well. So interested to see. And again, we've got some 800 meter runners which might feature here today. And when a cross country race is just 4 kilometers, Tim, you do start to look at some 800 meter runners as having a little bit of an outside chance.
No, that's absolutely right. Although Skipperin, she is a very much a middle distance runner. She's raced over 800 through to 3,000 this year. Some solid times, nothing really outstanding. But you're right. Yeah, has sort of been at college in the USA at Florida State, and just eases into the junior category. She'll be 20 on the 5th of March. So she squeezes into the under 20 category, which is good for her. If you're at the top end of an age category, and those junior age categories, then you're always at a bit of an advantage to somebody who might be 11 months or so younger.
Well, indeed, and hopefully we can identify a few more in this race as they go through that second lap very shortly. We know the logs are towards the end of this loop here at Warandeloop, this famous historic cross-country venue. Been going since 1956, hasn't it, Tim? It's had some fantastic athletes race, and you mentioned Sifan Hassan before. We'll talk more about her later, I'm sure, in that senior women's race, but 3 times winner in 2013, 2014, and 2015. Just when these ladies here would have been sort of growing into the sport, perhaps starting out at their club, so they would have been able to watch, a homegrown winner on this course, and here they are today competing, battling for that #1 prize.
No, absolutely right. And in fact, just looking at the winners of the previous winners of the senior women's race, you mentioned Sifan Hassan winning 3 times in a row. But Geta Wami, going back a few years into the late 90s for the Ethiopian superstar, she won 3 times. Lorna Kiplagat, twice world marathon champion, she's won here. Sabrina Mockenhaupt of Germany, one of their great marathon stars of the past, she won here in 2003. And the pace has really opened up, Matt, hasn't it? That is an acceleration, and the gap's appearing now. And that comfortable little group we had for the first 6 or 8 minutes, or the first 5 or 6 minutes, has really broken up.
Well, Skipperin, we said she studied out in America. Bit of a track specialist. She enjoyed that wide open section, Tim. She just extended her margin, and she wanted to go into the woods in front and with a little bit of a gap, with a bit of a breathing room as well, so she can attack the bends, kind of at her own will. But negotiated the logs well, but it was on that flatter section. She just put the hammer down. And I think rightly so. When you put it in terms of distance, they've got just over a mile of running left. This is about where you really want to be kind of redlining in a cross-country race. You'll know more than me, Tim.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's incumbent upon cross-country runners on a twisting course like this to know the course and to know the distances left, because as we saw with that finish, you turn a corner and there's suddenly the finish 50 or 60 meters away. Well, You've got to know when you're 400 meters out. You've got to know when you're half a mile out, 800 meters out. And as you say, 1,500 meters or a mile out, you've got to know how to start turning the screw on your opponents. And that applies to not only the leader, but somebody who's back maybe in 5th and 6th and having their own little battle. You've got to know how to gauge your effort over those final few minutes. And this is short and sharp. It's a test that doesn't really forgive errors. If you go out too hard or if you leave it too late, you will run out of track in which to kick and come back at somebody.
You will, but that gap, it's not getting any bigger at the moment, is it? Skipper will be checking her shoulder. She'll have some nervous checkbacks on those turns throughout this lap, no doubt. She's going to be getting feedback from her coach what that gap is, and you can often, when athletes go by, friends and family, they'll cheer for you, and then you'll hear, that name lurking in the background, and you'll kind of get a gauge how close they are. One advantage lady in second will have, though, is Skipper won't be able to hear her breathing, won't be able to hear her coming, I don't think, at this point, Tim, so she can make perhaps a kind of late surge, catch her by surprise as they come back onto that flat section, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? Because it was always so useful and I do it now when I go to cross-country meetings. I shout out to the leaders and other athletes how far they've got or what position they're in. Feedback from the sidelines is critical. And, somebody shouts to you, especially when you're under pressure and you're working really hard. You've got 50 meters or you've got 70 meters. That is such useful feedback. I know you can always glance around and have a look yourself, but I just used to love that information coming into me as often as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And the coaches, the athletes, friends and family, they'll know that. And I'm sure they're doing that out on the course. Team managers and whatnot. Of course, there's no real team prize today, so don't have to worry about that further down. But as we're seeing the athletes in 3rd and 4th come through picture, Tim, it is thinning out a little bit more bunched further back for those minor spots, those top 10 finishes. So all to play for still for those ladies. But where are we? About 10 minutes. Expect them we're probably about a kilometre or so away from the climax of this women's under 20 race.
Yeah, you always, it helps for these athletes further back down the field to know if they're in the top 10 or not. It's always a good target. If you can't be in the top 3, make the rostrum, then every place is vital. It's got to be in your nature to battle for every meter, for every place. And if you can make the top 10 when you're having whether you're having a good day or a bad day, that has a significance to it. You can get home and you can look at the result sheet. You can study it online, the form of the athletes you've beaten and the form of the athletes ahead of you, and take reinforcement from that. And, even if it's been a bad day at the office, you can learn and use that feedback. But Skipper, and they're still under pressure, Matt. That's only a couple of seconds lead she's got.
Well, she is under pressure, but as we know, that finish comes on them awfully quick as well, and we are running out of distance, so second place is going to have to work their way up onto Skipperen's shoulder any minute now. But I back Skipper to kind of hold on that 1,500 meter track speed as well. But you mentioned cross-country, Tim. It is very much a head-to-head, isn't it? It's not about times, and I like that side of the sport. I think it's so easy now, especially as the road just seems to be coming to the fore and getting more and more popular. Everyone comparing times, aren't they? Every single season, every race. It's becoming quite stat-heavy, whereas cross-country is one for the purists. All that matters is, did you finish ahead of your opposition?
Nice little battle going on for 3rd and 4th place there, as there is for the leading 2 places. This is the 5th place runner coming through, struggling a little bit to ID some of these athletes, so apologies for that. But Skipper going through, looking really strong. And is that gap closing, Matt? I think it is.
Oh, it's so hard to tell, isn't it? It might just be the camera angle, those head-on camera angles, we never know. But I counted as they went over those logs. It is literally just 2 seconds at this point, Tim. So we're not getting any live results updates. So it's just struggling to ID, like you said, a few of the athletes in this race. But it's going to be awfully close. But I measure this around about 400 to 600 meters left of running at this point in the race. So when the camera next comes back on these women, we are going to be into that finishing straight.
Well, there, each of them gets a very good idea of the task ahead if they're to catch the others in front of them. It's always a bit like a 4x400 meter relay. I don't know if you ever ran one for your club, Matt. I did, very slowly, obviously. But it's always better to get that baton in your hand and be on the shoulder of somebody, be in the lead. And for Van Skipper in here, maybe it's tough for her because unless she has a glance round, which immediately tells the athlete behind you that you're worried, she doesn't know what sort of lead she's got. The purist would say, well, it doesn't matter what's going on behind you. Keep your head down, keep your eyes front, and run as hard as you can. You should be giving 101% anyway. But that gap is sort of fixed at about 15 meters, something like that. And the athlete in second place at the moment isn't able to make any inroads, as you say quite rightly, Matt, with just a few meters to go.
Well, on the previous lap, Tim, this is where Skipper made her move. She made a move on that straight. She pulled away from the athlete behind her in second place. She's done exactly the same right at the perfect time because we've got, just a few 100 meters left. So she's got herself a buffer. She's got herself that nice little gap. She could just ease through these turns. And as we know, that finishing straight is not long at all. But she has got to keep her focus over these little mounds, these little bumps, because the last thing you want to do is have a little stumble and give the athlete behind a little sniff that you are catchable. But she looks good, Tim, and she's going to take that left-hand turn, and that will see her into the finish line.
Yeah, it's been a really well-managed run from Skipper. That gap, in fact, probably has grown a little bit now. Might be 20 or 25 meters, and here she comes now.
So, Beek Skipper studied out in America, but she's back here. Tilburg University lands, conquering once again this Tilburg cross country. Fantastic result from her. And the athlete in second there, running very well as well. Just identified her as Lotta Lange. So good run from her. And third place, Eva Falconer.
I think that second place was Hebe Chadwick of the Netherlands, 6:38. And good hard running from Skipper. And she did just enough, didn't she, to keep clear of her opposition.
She did indeed, and she just used the course to her advantage. Tip, that was the big thing for me. The sections of the course that she particularly enjoyed, that wide open road where she could just get the turnover going. She used those to her advantage and pulled away from the rest of the field. And I think you have to do that in cross country. It's about picking your moments.
Yep, her eventual winning margin was 6 seconds. Yeah, Chadwick coming through that. Her time 14:45. And in third place it was Evie Falconer. 13 seconds down on... Not as dominant a run as that of the leading under-20 man, Juan Zeidelan. Remember, he won by 9 seconds, but frankly, looked like he was very comfortable. I got the impression that Zeidelan in that under-20 men's race, Matt, could have pushed on much harder and got a bigger gap if he'd wanted, but he was cruising once he'd got 9 or 10 seconds gap, whereas Skipper was never really able to relax, was she? Because for much of that last kilometre or so, a couple of kilometres, her lead was only probably 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just kept her honest the whole way, didn't it? She could never, relax on that race at all. I think she had the advantage of it just being 4 kilometers or so coming from the collegiate system. They race over 6 kilometers and, 4 kilometers, this will be the distance these ladies will run at the European Championships in 2 weeks' time. But Tim, what's your thoughts on that? Quite short. We saw, when we look back through the archives as well, the women's cross country, even at this venue, only switched to 8K somewhat 2007. Before that, it was run over sort of 6 kilometers as well. So women's cross country seems to be getting, longer and longer as the years go by. And there's even talk of having equal distance, isn't there, at the senior age group? Senior women operating over 10,000 meters as well as the senior men. We know they do it on the track. We know they do it in the marathons and stuff like that. So it sometimes is a little bit odd that it's not equal distance on the country.
No, I agree. And I know it's a controversial issue. I mean, there are plenty of well-known prominent athletes who think the women's races shouldn't be changed and the distances should stay less than the men's. But frankly, that goes against the grain when you look at the way that track and field athletics has advanced this last 25, 30 years. On the track, women contest all the same distances from 100 up to the marathon, the same as the men, and won't it be the same in the country? There's that result, Matt. A good 6-second lead for Skipper to win that under-20 race.
All done in that last probably kilometre, less than last half a kilometre. skipper had managed to pull away and get that 6-second victory. So next up, Tim, we're going to turn our attention to those senior men. They're going to be off in 5 minutes' time. Senior and under 23 men, 10 kilometers. Talking of distance just then, they'll do one very, very small lap. That green loop, just 500 meters, and 5 yellow laps, just under 2 kilometers. So they're going to do a fair few laps of this course. So we might see a little bit more chop and change. So far, though, Tim, whoever's got to the front early on in these races seems to have come out on top.
No, that's right. That's right. And perhaps it's just the way it is for those 2 under 20 races as the athletes further back down the field continue to battle for every place. Good to see, even though they're a few minutes down on the leaders. But I don't know, I suppose cross-country, Matt, demands a sort of honesty, a bit like race walking. You know, I mean, I commentate in a lot of race walking these days. Love it or hate it. It's a bit of a Marmite event, perhaps, for many, but that means that the Marmite should reference that, actually, for non-Brits. It's a spread. It's a sort of beef spread that is very, very strong, and people either love it or they hate it. You don't get too many people in between. But you know, I like cross country because it does generally demand an honesty, Matt, that you don't get very often in track races where you see tactical running. Cross country tends to be pretty hard from the gun, I think, but often because of the nature of the courses, as we're seeing today. But it's just a nice philosophy that always attracted me to cross country.
I think absolutely. I think it's a level playing field, isn't it? What you're trying to say there. It's, you know, you could be not quite as fast as someone, but a lot of it as well, Tim, would you say comes down to mentality and grit? You can do all the training in the world, but cross-country runners tend to have a rep that they can go to a bit of a darker place than perhaps those track runners.
Yeah, no, that's right. As we see another promotion for the European Cross Country Championships. Remember, 2 weeks today, those Spa European Cross Country Championships in Brussels. I shall be out there commentating on the races for European athletics. There's the Atomium in the background, astonishing structure. I've still never been up it after all these years. I better hurry up or I'll be turning the lights out. Yeah, the country, the weather in these pictures, obviously slightly different to the weather today in the Warandeloop cross-country races in Tilburg. Let's hope it is a good testing course in Brussels. Nobody's going to complain about a bit of sunshine, but yeah, we want to see some mud, we want to see some hills, we want to see some sand, we want to see some good going underfoot, some grassland and flat running as well. A really good mix is what we like to see. And I love to see them at that, Matt, too, don't you? You don't see that exuberance on the track, do you, when people win a 5,000 by 20 or 30 metres?
I think we are always, we do enjoy some interesting celebrations, to say the least. And I'm flashing back, Tim, to Jimmy Gressier doing the odd knee slide on this in this exact venue, where he kind of made a bit of a fool of himself, but also made a name of himself as well. And he's gone on to kind of live up to that. We know he's a fantastic runner now, sub 13-minute runner over 5,000 meters. Gressier, we're certainly going to see him at those European Championships in 2 weeks' time. But I think, Tim, if there's not a sprint finish, athletes have a little bit more time, don't they, to really celebrate, jump into the tape. And, often you'll see them concocting up some celebrations before the race.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And speaking of before the race, this is the scene in the forest around Tilburg, just before the men's senior race, the senior men's race, and the under-23 runners mixed in there as well. 83 competitors go in this one. And the distance they race over, well, it's the long one, 10 kilometers, one small lap and 5 big laps. The time limits for entry to this were 29:15. 1, 2, 3 there, you can see that's Peter Jan Hannes of Belgium. These top athletes being introduced to the crowd. And Jan Hannes there will not have had to travel too far to get across to this. Kind of convenient, I suppose, if you're from the Low Countries. And you want to find racing, international racing, and 101. Well, that's Noah Schutter, the 28-year-old Dutchman. I had him down as perhaps the favourite, 3 times the Dutch champion. He jogs to the line there, having been introduced to this good gathering of spectators. He's a really solid track runner, 13:39 for 5,000. 14:8, 48:25 for 10 miles, and great form this year with personal bests at so many distances, Matt. So yeah, he's my favourite as they get underway in this men's gala race, the 10 kilometres. We have conclude the programme today with the two short course races, men and women, in that order. But this is a big field to head into that narrow gap after what, only 15 seconds or so as they enter the forest.
Well, you looked at one of the pre-race favourites, Tim, Noah Schute. He seemed to really struggle to get off the line. He's in the orange, and I can't even see him at the moment. He's very, very far back, so he's going to be very disappointed with that start. Of course, 10 kilometres, they've got a little bit more time to work their way up. But as we know, it gets very narrow, very fast here in Tilburg. So they're going to take that left-hand turn and start to twist and wind their way through these trees. So Schute, he's got a tough task ahead of him to work his way up this field because it looks fast from the gun. No hanging around at all, as you'd expect.
No, that's right. And I don't think you get too much showboating in cross country, do you? You get to see it in major marathons and other road races. You get somebody who'll lead for the first few hundred meters, and a real giveaway is when they start waving their arms after a couple of minutes. Not something I'm particularly a big fan of, but I think in cross country you tend to get the good names rising to the top pretty early on, and not too many showboaters, so to speak. That field of which was predicted as being 83 strong, with a course record, by the way, of 29:04. Is shifting now with only a minute and a half on the clock.
Oh, indeed. I mean, Tim, I'm just looking through those that first split. They're already through that first lap, absolutely flying through it. But some of the men that were introduced on that start line before have really struggled to get off the line. I'm looking at Peter Hans. He's just moving his way up. He's still kind of just outside the top 10. Noah Schute is also quite far back at this point. And would you be panicking at this stage in the race, Tim, or have you got long enough to kind of work your way up?
No, you've got long enough to work your way up. I mean, it is about concentration, and I think most people acknowledge that, at the World Cross Country Championships and other major international races, you have to get out of the blocks pretty quick. You have to blast that first few hundred meters to get up to the front. But if for some reason you don't, and occasionally it's happened to me over the years, happened to me in black and white virtually, it's so long ago. But the fact is that, you do have time to work up towards the front. If you're back in the 20th, 25th, 30th here because you had a bad start or you slipped, plenty of time to ease up towards the front. And, cream tends to rise to the top, but the more time there's given for that cream to rise to the top, the more likely it is that you will get cream at the top at the end of the process. So if it's a really short race, then mistakes are sometimes unforgiven. But if you make an error or you start a little bit slower than you wanted and it's a long race, you've got time through those first 3 or 4K of a 10K to ease up towards the front and then settle down into the right rhythm. And it may be, Matt, that sometimes that's the best thing, not to blast away from over the first 2 or 3K, to just ease your way up and keeping more steady pace and appear up on the shoulders of the leaders. And if that happened to me occasionally and I was running well, it was actually quite a nice feeling. You'd sort of move up towards the shoulders of the leaders after 6 or 8 or 10 minutes, go, hello, fellas. Yep, I'm here. How are you feeling? And I don't know if we'll see anybody do that here, but that lead has changed already.
It has, and you mentioned cream rising to the crop. I can already see Noah Schute back on that kind of top 10. Peter Hans is in there as well. Tom Hendricks, Dutch cross-country champion, is in that group. He's up the front there, but look out for the man in sort of a pale blue and pinky vest, Elias FIFA, former European 5,000 meter champion back in 2016. That was actually held in Amsterdam. Remember, just pre those Rio Olympics. He's there in second place at the moment as they just attack what is probably the steepest climb of the race.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you just lean into that one and roll over it. If you've got a good speed and momentum going into it, a hill that long, Matt, 20 or 30 meters long, you're at the top before you know it. It's only when you really, your tempo and your stride length is really compromised by a hill 50, 70 meters long or more that it becomes a significant factor. You can see most of these fellas negotiating this hill, for the first time at least, really well.
Well, they will. This will get interesting, Tim, these logs. Let's watch them negotiate this section of the course, because you can see there FIFA in second. That's the chase pack. I expect them to take a little bit closer order as the laps go by. They've got 5 large laps, these senior men in this cross gala cross country here in Tilburg. So plenty of time for them to work their way up, and positions will change. But there's one of your pre-race favourites. There is Noah Scute in the blue and orange vest. He's just negotiated those logs. So no fallers so far, Tim. Would you expect to see any? It's awfully busy.
I don't think so, no. I mean, those logs, they're about the only 2 log challenges on the loop, and you skip over them. You never look that brilliant because they're not high enough to employ steeplechase technique. But they're high enough to trip on if you're not concentrating. So you have to sort of skip over them, and it's not the most aesthetically pleasing of movement, but it doesn't really matter as long as you get over them and can drive on beyond them. So no, I hope we don't see any fallers. You can see the very experienced figure of FIFA there in the long black sleeves in second place. 34 years old now, the Spaniard. Former Moroccan, switched to Spanish nationality back in July 2015. He competes for the FC Barcelona club, and that's what I love about some of those big sports clubs in the Iberian Peninsula, both Portugal and Spain. You get clubs that are founded around the wealth and the massive finances of the football club, but they actually support multi-sports, whether it's basketball or athletics or other disciplines, which is great to see. And you don't get that so much in Northern Europe, certainly not in the UK, do you? You know, the massive wealth of the Premier League in the UK. Is it shared out amongst the community in other sports? Not to my knowledge.
Absolutely not. And I think, we see that in the UK, the impact it has on the development of clubs and the longevity of clubs, Tim. There are question marks, do these local athletic clubs have much of a place into the senior ranks? We know they feed the juniors, but they all seem to disappear. There's a huge dropout rate in this sport around about that, under 18, under 20 age groups. So, the fact that they do have, a collaboration with the football clubs, I think gives athletes an opportunity to earn a little bit of living out of this sport because, as we know, prize money and sponsorships are few and far between, even at this level. So that pack now is what was just Tom Hendricks up front. They've all closed up, and we got about a pack of 5 or 6. Noah Scute leads that second chase pack as well. Can he latch onto them and join them? So we got 6, 7 guys, Tim, at the front of this race. We really have kind of settled now. We're a lap into it. They've all experienced the loop. 4 to go.
Well, you know what's interesting, with 8 minutes on the clock, we've got a steeplechaser at the front. I think it's Tim van der Velde, the 23-year-old Belgian who leads. He is a steeplechaser. I mentioned it just now as they went over those logs, the word steeplechase, but he's a pretty useful athlete on the flat too, van der Velde. Steeplechasers are a tough old breed. They're made of really strong metal because of those barriers. I mentioned earlier what a difficult discipline the steeplechase is. But Van der Velde, he's a 3:38 1,500 meter runner. There he's in blue to the left of the group with the blonde hair. He's an 8:24 steeplechaser. That was a couple of years ago. Came 12th in the European under-20 steeplechase championships back in 2017. He is only 23 now. And this year he was 3rd in the Belgian steeplechase championships, 8th in their cross-country championships back in February. But he's having a good run today so far. These gaps, though, Matt, are opening pretty quickly, aren't they? I mean, we have got only less than 10 minutes on the clock, and there are big gaps out there.
Yeah, we're almost seeing quite a few subgroups forming, actually. So you're almost getting athletes playing a little bit tactical. And I think that is down to athletes getting stuck behind one another, Tim, on these twisty sections. That is why we're kind of getting these packs, big gap pack. Because if one man at the front decides not to go with it and follow the man in front, then you almost get a queue-like formation behind him. But you mentioned Tim van der Velde, Tim, and 3:38 1,500 speed, just converting that to an 8:24 steeplechase. You'd maybe expect him to be slightly quicker over the steeplechase, given that flat speed. I know quite a few steeplechasers who are around about that 8:20 mark who haven't broken 3:40 for 1,500 yet. So perhaps he's got more to come off in the steeplechase, especially going into this Olympic year next year.
No, exactly right. I mean, he's a 1:58.100 guy. He's got pretty good leg speed and very experienced too. For a lad of 23, he was 7th in the World Junior Steeplechase Championships back in 2018. So Van der Velde has all the speed and I think all the strength to stay pretty close to the front there. As we see this leading 20 coming through, negotiating this right-hand turn, the some of the back markers to ride a picture heading out on that particular loop. But here they come through now. And is that FIFA, I think, has moved to the front now. Maybe beginning to ask some questions. He was in great shape earlier on this year. And even more recently, came second in the Belfast cross country over 8K just a month or so ago. Yeah, FIFA it is there, with Van der Velde side by side pretty much to the front. Although you're right, Matt, there's a big old pack at the front. There's what, sort of 10 or 15 athletes within a very few seconds.
Yeah, it's very tight. We can't call it yet. At this stage in the race, you just kind of have to key off them and see how they're feeling. You look out for facial expressions, don't you? You look out for who seems to be covering the surges, although you don't want to be covering too many surges at this early stage. Someone we haven't mentioned, Tim, Filimon Tesfu of the Netherlands, 30 years of age, such a strong runner. One performance which stood out in particularly to me was that 62 minutes and 4 seconds half marathon, and that was what, just a month ago out in Valencia. So he's in great shape, and you can often, you know, use that half marathon shape, all the miles you put in over the summer into the cross country season. So he's one to watch. He's in that lead pack, just latching on the back there.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Matt Van der Velde has drifted back to about 5th place. We have a new lead. Just can't quite identify him at the moment, but that's single file for this section. And they are travelling. They really are. It's a lovely surface underfoot for the vast majority of this race. It's a great surface. It's not one of those courses where there are significant changes in surface material. It doesn't test them in that respect. So it is a surface for quick racing. It's a case of, after that, how well you negotiate the twists and the turns and the lumps and the bumps. And at the moment, well, it's pretty even between the top 10 or so. The gaps are very small. And I think that probably is Tesfu in 3rd place in the yellow and green vest, just tracking everything going on in front of him. But that's a group of about 7 or 8, just beginning to ease away.
It is, and you know, the ones behind, it looks like we might even get another subgroup as well, because there's just 3 at the back of this group who seem to be struggling, not quite covering the moves and the turns in the same way those ahead of them are as well. You mentioned Tesfu in that yellow and green vest, and it's at Niels Voigt at the front. We'll get confirmation on that. I'm not 100% certain it is, but I think actually in the yellow and green vest, Tim, it is Senai of Norway. So look out for him. I recognise that yellow and green vest with the Ingebrigtsens. And you start to see a little bit more of that Norwegian club setup as well, don't you? So he'll be someone who's looking to bid his spot and maybe prove form and fitness going into that European Championships. What a strong team that Norwegian distance camp has.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course it is that the Ingebrigtsen family who have created that head of steam in athletics generally in Norway, but particularly in middle and long distance running, where athletes need to believe. And I suspect an awful lot of them are looking at the Ingebrigtsen family and going, well, if they can do it, why can't I? It's not all about getting away to warm weather. The Ingebrigtsens spend much of their training in the less than friendly weather of Norway. And that pack, yes, 2, 4, 6, 8 strong now. And that's a significant gap behind them. And we've seen the lead change 2 or 3 times in the last 5 minutes, Matt, which is good. It suggests that, and then again, I allude back to race walking, where if the pressure eases off at the front, somebody else volunteers and gets to the front and gets their head down and pushes on. And it's the same here today, because they are really motoring there. There's not much quarter being given. And again, I love that. I love that honesty of cross-country running. It's hard from the front.
Well, absolutely. And I think there's certain sections of this course which athletes will enjoy more than others as well. And I think that's why they end up at the front of this pack, because they'll go around a particular turn, or they'll go up a bump or a little undulation, and they'll just enjoy it, and they'll just find themselves at the front of this group without even thinking too hard about it, without actually making that move to do so. And so I think that's why we are seeing the lead chop and change so much. And it's interesting, isn't it? You start to learn as the laps go by, Tim, that, you know what, I enjoy this particular twisty section, or the logs. I'm particularly good through the logs. That's where I'm going to make my move going into the last lap. So I'm sure these athletes will be feeling each other out at this point in the race and starting to judge where they're going to make their move later on. But it is Niels Voigt up at the front, 10,000 meter personal best of 27:30. Believe it or not, that race out in the States, you know, set up especially for fast times. and 21st at those World Championships in Budapest, Tim. So he is someone who, when you look on paper, actually coming off the summer he's had, he should be right at the front of this race.
No, absolutely right. And he's a member of the Wattenscheid Club, one of the great big powerhouses of German track and field athletics for many, many years now. He's broken 28 minutes 3 times in his career. He's a good, consistent racer, Niels Voigt. And they are shifting. Look how quickly they ease up that rise. And the gap back to this group, about 5 seconds as they continue to push on hard. And Senai Hadsion of Norway, former Eritrean, is up there and doing his share of the leading as well. Yeah. It's a 340, 1500 meter runner. He's a good, aggressive racer too. He's equally put the Norwegian national record just in September, only a couple of months back, ran 13:29 on the road. So he's in good shape. He comes into this autumn and early winter racing season in very fine form. I don't know if you mentioned, Matt, his half marathon personal best back in the middle of September. He's very strong. And if you're strong, and again, maybe you've sized up the opposition and you know there's some good speedsters in there, it makes so much sense just to get to the front and keep pushing on and asking questions of the others.
Yeah, he looks to be almost encouraging FIFA, who was leading the way through these logs, to just kind of get a bit of a move on. He's, as if to say, look, we can break these guys if you just either let me round or just continue to push the pace. I think there is a little bit of that. It's hard to get round. You can see the technicality of this course, one which looks very, very fun to run. I must say, I'd love to get out there and weave round these woods. But we'll check what they are on this next split, because we know they're going to be coming round to complete their third lap very shortly.
Yeah, well, there's a good scene. You get that foreshortening effect, but the gaps actually between this leading group of 6 or 8 is actually quite big. Back to the second group being led by the athlete in purple with the headband.
It's Peter Hans.
The leader, wasn't it? Was that? I'm just trying to see who that
Peter
was.
Hans of Belgium, I think, leading that chase pack, Tim. Former 334 1500 meter runner, very good on that European track scene as well. So he's in a pretty tricky position, is Hans at this stage. Almost wants to be on that chase pack, can't quite get there, and they go back into this twisty section. He's a bit of a bigger figure. I'm not sure he's going to like those turns quite as much as someone like FIFA, who just seems to be absolutely throwing himself around them at the moment. Niels Voigt hanging on in there as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what the leaders will want to do, is to get rid of the really fast 1500 meter runners who may be less comfortable on anything over 5k. Although, for a variety of reasons, Matt, over this last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a generation of middle distance runners come through. Niels Voigt leading from FIFA and Fissa Hadsion, as you can see. We've got a sort of generation of middle distance runners who can hack it at 5,000 and 10,000. And that never used to be the case going back to, well, even after my day. My day was a long time ago, the 1980s. But through the 90s, you didn't get many 1,500 meter runners who could make it good at 5,000. 3,000 was their upper range. And you certainly didn't get 1,500 meter runners who could make it at 10,000. Now, if that's because of incremental changes in training, or if it's because of the new footwear these last 4 or 5 years, I'm not sure which is the most influential factor. But it would have been unheard of going back 25, 30 years for a world-class 1,500 meter runners to be mixing it over 10k with the really strong 5 and 10k runners.
It seems commonplace, doesn't it, for these world-class 1,500 runners to be up, over 100 mile a week in training, to be doing half marathons in their off-season. I mean, Josh Kerr, 1,500 meter champion, did a half marathon in, 63 minutes isn't going to set the world alight in half marathon running, but it's strong running for a 1,500 runner. And, I think Jakob Ingebrigtsen, he really laid that down, didn't he, Tim? He kind of paved the way for those and said, look, I'm over here. I can compete over 1,500. I can compete over 5K, 10K. And I bet your life, if he did a half marathon, he'd be under 60 minutes. Is that fair to say, Tim? So that's kind of the level these 1,500 runners operate at. So you are right. It is a change. It is a shift in the way we, I think, train. The modern way of training now seems to be all this lactate threshold. A term you probably didn't use too much in your day, Tim. It was just hard running.
Well, we did threshold sessions, but we mixed it in with other stuff, whereas I think the Ingebrigtsen family have done with their father, who used to coach them, is to focus more upon that. And it sort of makes sense, I suppose, if you break things down and look at it. You say, well, what's going to be the main challenge to you, whether you're running 1,500, 3,000, 5,000, and it's going to be those lactate levels. And if you can push back that red line, so to speak, so that you can hold a really hard pace for longer, it makes sense to train and focus upon that. And Ingebrigtsen, I mean, we keep talking about him, but actually he is one of those great freaks of nature. When I was at the European Championships in Berlin in 2018, when he was 17 years old, and he took a 1,500, 5,000 double, and that would have just been like something out of science fiction or some kid's comic. When I was a kid, it's been absolutely impossible going back to the 70s and 80s and 90s for a 17-year-old to win any European title, and certainly a double of that nature. So he is 1 in 100 million, 1 in 100 billion, I suspect we'll find out in a few years' time, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, even though, very sadly, of course, and many of you listening will know that he has had to pull out of those Brussels cross-country championships, European cross-country championships in 2 weeks' time with injury. But I guess what he's achieved, Matt, maybe creates possibilities in the minds of others as well. And as we've talked about mentors and barrier breakers, and that's what Ingebrigtsen has done, I suppose. That he's made it normal to be a 1,500 and 5,000 meter runner. He holds the European record for 5,000, who can also hack it at 10,000 and longer.
He has indeed. I'm just keeping an eye on the race. It's still FIFA up front at the moment, just turning the screw. He's starting to, he hasn't whittled down this group yet, but he certainly looks to be stretching them out a little bit, asking a few questions. And I think he's going to make a surge over this lap like he currently is now. And we're just starting to see that group splinter. I think a few of the men, we can see Scute on the back, Niels Voigt in the kind of blue and dark and black shorts, blue vest and black shorts hanging as well in 4th place. So a few of these men struggling to go with it now as FIFA just stretches on this 4th lap. So we could see what was a pack of 8. Well, the next time they come around that finish line area, just a pack of 3 or 4. So the race is on up at the front.
Well, you'd expect that with 2/3 the way through the race. And this is where, if you are feeling strong and you're up in that front group, you need to start turning the screw. Don't leave it too late. Make them really hurt. And I always used to think, Matt, if you were at the front and you were pushing on and somebody was not up on your shoulder, that tells you to an extent that they are struggling. That's the sort of optimistic way of looking at what little information you get when you're in front. You can't see your competitors, but they're behind you. And all you can do is assume that unless they've got a superb kick on them, that they are going to struggle if you continue to turn the screw in those last 2 or 3 kilometers. You do get exceptions to the rule, Matt. I can remember back in 1989, I was in very good shape. I'd come second in the world cross country, and I went back to Norway for after the championships there, the world championships there, and ran in a race. And they said, look, there'll be no competition. If you come over here, run round, pick up a few dollars, and you'll be fine. And I ran this race, and there was this pitter-patter behind me the whole race. And we came into the home straight, and this complete unknown scuttled past me and beat me. And I'd been second in the World Championships a couple of weeks earlier. His name, Khalid Skar. He became Olympic champion a couple of years later at 10,000. So there's always that unknown. You expect the unexpected, as they say.
Yeah, it sounds like it was Scar's coming out race, Tim. That was his announcement to the world. I'm here and I'm here to stay. So... so look here. So FIFA's still leading the way. We're now very much single file in this men's race. Niels Voigt looks to be struggling to hang on. Someone we haven't mentioned too much of is Thomas Van Oppen. He's the Belgian athlete. I think he is in the all-black strip. In sort of just, sitting in 3rd place at the moment. And, Fise Hatsion of Norway doing a great job. He's been lurking in 2nd place, Tim, all race long. He's been right on the heels of FIFA, letting him know he's there, clipping his heels the whole way, to FIFA's frustration. But that, you can see, of course, whenever there's a good bit of running, they really do stretch things out, these gentlemen at the front, and they ask the questions of those more track-based athletes, those 5,000-meter runners on the track. Even they're starting to struggle, and we're leaning towards those kind of half-marathon men, 10,000-meter men. As that's a flashback up the hill. The race doesn't look like that now. We're sort of 2 kilometers up the road from this small replay we're getting.
Well, here they come down the longest straight of the race. The lead cyclist doing a good job just making sure that the course is clear. Everybody's off the course as they come through the second cyclist checking behind him. Doing a wonderful job, these guys. And a big shout out briefly for all the volunteers who make this race meeting possible. But FIFA leads through, and Fischer Hadsion of Norway hanging onto his coattails. And those gaps have developed. There was a slight easing off because I think the second group was catching that lead group. And then FIFA, over the last 2 or 3 minutes, has just cranked it up another notch. And he has dragged Fischer Hadsion of Norway away with him. And that pair seems to be away with 25 minutes on the clock. We've probably got about 4 minutes of running to go. So we're in the final couple of kilometres. The final mile, if you like your pounds, shillings and pence. And the leaders there to the left of picture, negotiating this final circuit. And the gaps are appearing at last. So FIFA, who's done so much of the hard work through the middle stage of this race, still hasn't got the win in the sorted out yet. The former European champion back in Amsterdam 2016. But Matt, we're guaranteed a fabulous dust up over this final 1,500 metres or so.
Oh, we certainly are. It looks like it's going to be a 2-horse race. I'm interested to see if Fischer Hadsion can make a move and will actually choose to get in front of FIFA at any point, because as we know, it will open back up before it really narrows before that left-hand turn into the finish. So will Fischer Hadsion make his move then, or will he just bide his time and try and bank on being able to get past FIFA in that last 60 metres of that finishing straight? We are 2 or 3 minutes away, like you said, from the climax of this race, from that finishing straight, as we just see these men come past shot, and it's still FIFA up front. Questions now being asked Fischer Hadsion, and the margins they've put him on those behind is astronomical in just a very, very short space of time.
Well, it underlines the quality of the acceleration that FIFA, a little glance over his shoulder there, FIFA has applied over these last 3 or 4 minutes, because that is a big gap. And literally 4 or 5 minutes ago, the group was still together, about 8 strong. But it's FIFA, Ilias FIFA, the 34-year-old Spaniard, former Moroccan, great track racer, although his personal bests go back quite a few years. 7:40 for 3,000 back in 2017. 13:05, but that was back in 2015, 8 years ago now. On the track, at least, it looks like he is much the quicker of the two. But Fischer Hadsion at 27, well, he might have the fresher legs there in the orange in second place. He's got the strength. We know that. He's a great half marathon runner. A couple of very quick half marathons back in February and again in April. He ran 61 minutes for a half marathon. He ran 60:55 for a half marathon personal best back in the middle of September. So we know he's got that foundation of fabulous road strength. Has he got the speed to handle the Spaniard over this final few hundred metres? 27.5 minutes on the clock. The gaps have opened up, and it's undoubtedly between these two that the title is going to go.
Well, you talk about those coming out races, Tim. Can Fischer Hadsion make this his? Can he dethrone FIFA? Can he announce himself 2 weeks before that European Championships as a title contender, as someone who's going to feature in that top 5 at least, you would expect, with those kind of road credentials that he's got? These two have been inseparable for 28 minutes of running. They have literally got about 200-300 meters left of this race, so it's going to be hard to call. They're going to swing round into that finishing straight any minute now. In third place, a little pan back, that's Thomas Van Oppen. He's a 3:37 1,500 meter man. You bank on him to hold that position, don't you, with just 300-400 meters left of this race?
Well, you do, and FIFA glancing over his shoulder again there to check what's going on behind him. But Fischer Hadsion hanging onto his coattails stubbornly. And this is always, it used to anger me almost. And that's not a bad thing. It gives you more fire in your belly. If you cannot shake somebody off through these final twists and turns, and they're hanging onto you and you're doing the work, it makes you more determined to shake them off. So FIFA will be digging very, very deep here now. Ilias FIFA, still a great runner. The European champion at 5,000 of 2016. Ran in the 5,000 metres back in the Rio Olympics in 2016. They haven't got far to go now. The gap back to third place, and I think that's either Van Oppen back in third place. Here they come, though, into the finishing straight. The sprint for the line. Who's going to have the legs? Is it FIFA? No, it's the Norwegian who takes it there. Brilliant running from Fischer Hadsion. Maybe the younger legs gave him the speed. 1:76 coming through for third place. And that's a brilliant run behind Fischer Hadsion and Ilias FIFA. They're inseparable at the line. 1:76 coming through for third place there. And that is Thomas Van Oppen, who gets onto the rostrum. Phil Montesfu, some way back in 4th place. But brilliant. And Fissa Hatsion, well, FIFA did everything he could to, Matt. Certainly FIFA threw the kitchen sink at him, but Fissa Hatsion, it was almost like he was tied to the coattails of the Spaniard. And eventually FIFA having to give way to the greater speed. Look at that gritted teeth from the Spaniard. But arms raised to Fissa Hatsion, the former Eritrean, at 27, punches the air. That's a big win.
Oh, so often you see it, don't you? Just biding his time. Just out-kicking FIFA there in the dying embers of that race. But yeah, first Dutchman home, Philmon Tesfu in 4th. He'll obviously be the Dutch national champion. And I saw a few late celebrations as well from a few Dutch athletes a little bit further down the field. Fokkenrud as well, Futsala. Those guys just making that Dutch team for 2 weeks' time. So they'll be chuffed if these men flock across the line. But yeah, what a race, Tim. Fissa Hatsion, well, he's a name that we should start to look out for. I think it won't be the last time we see him, especially on the cross-country circuit.
No, absolutely right. It'll be interesting to see how Fissa Hatsion can go at those European Championships. And there it is, confirmation of the top 8. Fissa Hatsion of Norway, 29.10. Same time as FIFA, who he just out-sprinted by a metre. Great running for Thomas van Oppen of Belgium for 3rd place. So Tesfu and Schutter Hendricks are the Dutch cross-country champion earlier on this year. Hendricks back in 6th place. Niels Voigt of Germany, Nikolai Sake of Belgium making it 7th and 8th. But 29.10, well, that is good running. That's really strong running. The course record 29.04 was actually under threat thanks to the winding up there of FIFA. They only missed that course record, which goes back to 2001. Wilson Chelai of Kenya running 29.04. So it was a really high caliber race in glorious conditions. We have to say, Matt, these are perfect conditions for cross country. No wind. They're sheltered in there in the woods, 6 or 7 degrees. It's a cool, crisp morning, but really good growing underfoot.
Oh, absolutely. We mentioned before as we came on air, athletes will be choosing to go for track spikes on this circuit. I think it will favour the track runners. And, you know, we look at Fissa Hatsion, and he's coming from that road background, running very, very well on the roads in 2023. So I think this was almost a bit of a road circuit. So one that he could enjoy. Wasn't going to ask any questions of that strength in the legs on a boggy cross-country course. And, of course, it allows you to really, you know, be able to utilize that sprint finish as much as possible, because you can bank on good footing on this finishing straight, whereas there are some courses, you know, you just can't bank on the footing in the finishing straight. Very hard to get any sort of speed and bounce back from the terrain, but not here in Tilburg. It's holding up pretty well as well, Tim. I mean, if it was to rain, we saw at the European Cross Country Championships back in 2018 when they held it here, it was raining quite heavily that day. And I know it was quite slippy on the surface, firm underneath, but slippy on top, asking a few questions around those turns. But so we preview those European Championships in just 2 weeks' time. And of course, this is 2024. It's going to be another World Cross Country Championships. Tim, I believe it's been moved to Serbia, Belgrade, which also hosted the European Championships a few years ago.
No, absolutely right. Yes, the World Cross Country and the European Cross Country, both in fine fettle. The sport of cross country running generally, as we see this promotion for those Spire European Cross Country Championships in Brussels in 2 weeks today. Do join us for those, won't you, on European Athletics YouTube. A whole host of races coming through there, the under-20s, the mixed relays, the under-23s, and the senior races, all in one day on Sunday, the 10th of December. Do mark your card. But the sport of cross country is in rude health. And it would be appropriate if it could be inserted into the Olympic Games. There is increasing talk of that these days. I know there's many, many people who believe it should be. It's a branch of the sport that, with the World Cross Country now biannual, is been strong and popular throughout the world. And it's huge in the USA. It's huge in much of Europe. It's a sport that does deserve a higher platform, more exposure and visibility. And I really do hope that comes to be. Cross country in the Olympic Games. It used to be, and then it was back in, was it one of the Olympics earlier on in the earlier part of the 20th century. It was held in Paris, and it was about 35 degrees, and there were bodies all over the place, and a lot of athletes suffering. And they said, oh, no, we can't hold cross-country in the summer in the Olympic Games. It's too hot. Nobody thought to suggest, well, hang on, there's a 5,000 and a 10,000, there's a marathon. So what's wrong with having a cross-country race in a bit of sunshine?
Yeah, it's well, it'll be interesting to see how that grows, Tim, and if it does get included, if at some point in the Olympic Games. We were talking off air, weren't we, about what sort of athletes would go for it? Would we just see the 5,000 to 10,000 athletes come back and do the cross country? I mean, Stefan Hassan seems to be breaking new grounds. Dutch athlete at the moment seems to be doing all of them, doesn't he? 5, 10K marathon, 1500, all at the same championships almost. So, would we get those athletes just almost tripling? Or would we get a whole new crop of athletes, cross-country specialists? I mean, I really do think it does. The sport is growing so much that, you can't afford, you don't get too many athletes being able to double anymore like they used to, especially over the 800 and 1500. That used to be a common double. Those events seem like, worlds apart now, and the 1500 seems to be more of a, as we were talking, a 5,000 meter specialist event, So it'd be interesting
you're
to
right.
see
You're
how it
right.
develops.
I mean, Hassan, she'd have to quadruple, wouldn't she? She ran the 15, 5, and 10, I think, in Budapest. So she's. Would you make it possible for her to quadruple? That starts entering the realms of absurd, doesn't it? If you've got a 9-day Olympic Games athletics program and somebody can do 4 different disciplines with heats and finals in a couple of them, crikey, that would be a real shock. I'd like to think that the cross country course, if they're going to introduce it to the Olympic Games, would be different to today. It would be a more robust, more demanding cross country course with significant hills, and I mean really significant hills that make it so different to a 5,000 or 10,000 on the track that athletes would veer away from it and focus upon their track specialization, or indeed specialize and target the cross country challenge. But that's just me being an oldie again. I like cross country as a specific discipline and the tests that should come with it.
Yeah, I think cross country, event organizers are getting much more creative with their courses now, aren't they? I think the World Cross Country in Aarhus really demonstrated that, running on a rooftop, beer tents and stuff. So expect to see a few more exciting cross country courses in the future. I mean, this one in front of us today here at Tilburg offers some great entertainment. I mean, just look at those switchbacks and turns. That is the course map. That is the large lap for you, that yellow outline, and you can just see so many sort of U-turns, twist turns. Not many, we got 2 long straight sections there for athletes to really enjoy and overtake, as we've seen in all the races. Very little room to overtake. So that's what they'll use. They'll kind of plan that out in their head beforehand, and just depending on how they feel at certain stage of the race, what lap they choose to do that. And but you can see it does make for an exciting race.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at that, it looks like somebody's back garden, doesn't it? It looks like, I don't know, I said back garden, perhaps like the Palace of Versailles or something like that. You wouldn't know from that shot necessarily that those paths, so beautifully planned out, so symmetrical, more or less symmetrical, are actually embedded in a big forest. But that's the way it is. The Oude Warande is one of the big forests around Tilburg, and it's hosted these races for many years, with a few exceptions. The odd championships here and there, the odd occasion it's been held at another venue. But today we're back to the old traditional venue of the Warandeloop. And Matt, the senior women with a field of how many starters was it? 55 starters, I think, in this one.
It looks like all 55 are almost set and ready to go. Interestingly, the starter will get things underway, fire his gun. He won't move. He won't try and scamper off to the side. We've seen some horrible accidents in the past, haven't we, in cross country, where the starters almost slipped trying to get out the way of the runners charging towards him. So these days they just stand exactly where they are in a big red jacket, as you can see on screen, and these runners will go round him. So moments away from the senior women in this cross gala here in Tilburg. Going to get underway. 8 kilometers ahead of them, so exactly the same course as the men. They'll just do one less long lap.
Looks like a significantly smaller field than in the men's race, and that's is not a problem. 55 starters. The course record, by the way, 26:40, was set last year by Sarah Lahti of Sweden. That was she was really flying. Meraf Bato, Sweden, won the previous year in 27:43. But last year, Latte was over a minute quicker than that. I guess, Matt, with cross country, the fact is that the conditions underfoot can vary so much that if it's really wet and boggy, then it will slow you down significantly. And that would explain a lot of the differentiations in winning times.
Absolutely. I think on this course, given the twists and turns, if it's particularly boggy on those turns, you're not going to be able to accelerate out of them quite as much, are you? But you talk about Sarah Larty, Tim, she's here today. I haven't quite spotted her yet. I'm sure we will as this race gets underway. But she's a Swedish national 5,000 meter champion. 15:04 over 5,000 meters, her personal best. So that really is world-class running. 15 minutes being that barrier for a lot of these senior women on the world level. So away they go then. The last long race of the day. These senior women here in Tilburg do battle over 8 kilometers. And as I said, pre-race favourite Sarah Larty, we will try and identify her, the Swedish athlete, coming here to spoil Dutch parties as they bottleneck into the course.
Wow. That's an aggressive start with less than a minute on the clock. And a gap has opened up already. And the pattern of the previous races, Matt, I guess you could say, quick from the gun, being repeated here, but actually with interest. Look at that.
That is an exceptionally fast start, and it may well be Sarah Larty. We'll know in just a few moments' time when they go through that first split of this race. We know it's around about 500 meters, and it is. She's way out in front. She's 5 seconds, Tim, in just over a minute of running. She's 5 seconds ahead of Natalie Blomqvist of Finland, and first Dutch athlete, Vil Baker, in 6th place at the moment, and a few Belgians in here as well. I said before that the Belgian team has been selected for those European Championships in Brussels, so for them this is just another good run out, just to measure where their fitness is, practice, running in a pack in quite a bunch cross country like this one. But Leety, well, Tim, you mentioned her course record 26:40. She may well be coming here to attack it. Conditions are good. It's very, very fast underfoot, and she has set off with intent.
Hasn't she just? Yes. I mean, when you think that this race, the race distance in the senior and under 23 women's race this one is 8 kilometres, 8,000 metres. That's 5 miles if you want it in UK miles. She has, in the space of just a couple of minutes, opened up a massive lead. Now, if it was an 8K race on the track, and you were going to run 20 laps on a track, would you in the first 2 laps or 3 laps sprint away and have a 30, 40, 50 metre lead? It would be unheard of. Everybody, just about everybody on the track would settle into a nice steady rhythm. This suggests, Matt, that she is, as you say, attacking the course record, her own course record from last year, but also that she's operating at a different level to anybody else, because this was a real slap in the face for the other competitors right from the gun. You're not often prepared for this sort of tactic, and it's taken them by surprise.
I think she is a different level. I'm just looking through, here are some of the athletes in behind her as well. And the next, fastest 5,000 meter runner is around about a 16. So somewhat 30 seconds behind Sarah Larty. So yeah, to answer your question, if she was doing an 8K race on the track, maybe she would. But you are a lot more exposed on the track, aren't you? In this deep forest here in Tilburg, no wind to worry about. And you know what? She can kind of get out front. And when you're in this position, like Larty is, it's out of sight, out of mind for these athletes. They're going to start having a race amongst themselves instead of worrying about that gap up ahead. Sort of, can they close it? They're just going to kind of bide their time and ease round this first lap, so she can almost get some free money here, Tim, I think, over this first lap or so.
Well, I just counted her gap, her lead there. After 3.5 minutes, Matt, she's got a 10-second lead. This could become an exhibition run from Sarah Larty. Brilliant running. The Swedish cross-country champion, and they breed them tough up there. The weather up in Sweden has just been turning really cold for the last week or so. Sub-zero temperatures much of the time. And I guess, there is something in that. You look at the Scandinavians, they've put up with several thousand years of rather cold weather, the last few hundred years. If up in Norway, you're bred to be efficient and conscientious, because frankly, up until the last 50 or 100 years, if you weren't conscientious and you didn't make your jams and bottle your fruits and all that sort of thing in the summer months, you were dead by November. So you've got this super race of really smart, conscientious disciplined people in effect for much of the DNA base in the Scandinavian nations. And Lahti here, clearly a tough competitor and full of confidence, Matt, to go out that hard.
I did notice she checking her watch there on that straight section of the course, one of the few straight sections there is, and that would indicate maybe she is kind of setting off with a bit of intent for that course record, or maybe she just kind of is using this as a bit of a training run, a bit of a tempo run, Tim, and just wants to lock in, or whatever her kind of threshold tempo run speeds is. She's someone who is definitely, with no doubt, going to feature in 2 weeks' time at those European Brussels. I mean, she's the Swedish cross-country champion over the long and short course, and she might be doubling. You never know. I think my memory serves me right. That relay race, that mixed relay race, is after the senior women's cross country, so she might double back for that Swedish team. We don't know. That's me, theorizing right now.
The mixed relay is at 1:10 in Brussels in a couple of weeks' time, and the senior women's race is at 2:35. So the mixed relay would be before her long race over 9K, the senior women's race. Both men's and women's senior races are over the same distance, 9 kilometers in Brussels.
Which is what we were talking about, equal distance. The talk of this senior ladies race, 8 kilometers. It was first 8 kilometers in 2013. Before that, it was just 6 kilometers. Had a year at 7.1 kilometers as well, but yeah, just 6.2 kilometers in the early 2000s. They've now upped it to 8 kilometers, and I wonder if over the next few years they will make it equal distance to that men's race of 10 kilometers like they do at the European Championships, because it is hard for these women. They race all season long over 8K. Sometimes, I mean, I was commentating on the Cardiff Cross Challenge and World Tour just a few weeks ago, and that was over 6.5K for the senior women. So, quite a contrast to a 10-kilometer European Championship race. So they don't get many opportunities to really practice that. And I think that's why we see these women take to the road maybe over 10,000 meters to prepare for those European Championships.
No, absolutely right. You've got to be able to accommodate and deal with the challenges of the distance and not feel that it's right at your upper range if you can run it competently. But there we saw Sara Lahti go through, and look at the gap back. It's about 9 or 10 seconds now, the gap from Lahti to her pursuers, Natalie Blomqvist, Jana van Lent, Juliet Thomas, Julie Vogt. Blomqvist of Finland was in second place, but that was very early on. We'll try and bring you an update now. Here it comes, Matt.
Looks like Jana van Lent
seconds.
in second.
She's not really imposing herself anymore on them. It's grown from 9 to 13 seconds over this last 5 minutes or so. So she's maybe just gradually easing away, but she established that big gap so early on. It's almost disheartening for the others behind her, I guess, Matt, because there's only the odd place here and there where they even get to see her. I mean, she's almost created a big enough gap to be out of sight the majority of the race now.
She certainly has. This is one of the few sections on the course that perhaps getting a little bit cut up at the moment, as the lead bike will go through and churn up that terrain for these women, but there's not too many places on the course which are like this. Yes, I mean, due to the switchbacks on this course, Tim, I think the nice thing that Sara Lahti will have is she'll be able to kind of look across to her right, look across to her left, and see the kind of gap she's got on those women in behind her. That we just have a little subgroup here giving chase. That is the battle for third, though, because we know that Jana van Lent of Belgium, the under-23 athlete, is in second, and she's got a nice little 3-4 second gap buffer at the moment, as Lahti's through the picture already.
Well, the question is, I think now, not as whether or not Sara Lahti can win, but how much can she win by? But also, can she attack her? Can she break her own course record in this women's competition? Because 26:40 last year, and she's a year stronger now, and clearly in very, very good shape. Matt, I wonder if she can get that course record.
Well, we're going to get a little bit more of an indication, aren't we, after this third lap to see kind of what she's lapping. I mean, interestingly, we get some good splits. 7.5 minutes on the clock for the first small lap, and the second lap included. So that would indicate around about a six-minute lap time for just under 2 kilometers. So she is operating at some very, very strong speeds at the moment. Getting down near 3 kilometers on this course for these ladies is exceptional running. But she has got a 68-minute half marathon. She's a national record holder in the half marathon for Sweden. She's just going from strength to strength at the moment at this stage in her career.
Yeah, she's super experienced too. You know, she ran in the Olympic Games 10,000 in Rio back in 2016. And that, even if you don't finish high up and you finish down the field, she's 20. She was only 21 then. It means that you're accumulating experience. She finished 12th in Rio, actually, in a national record. She gave a really good account of herself back then, 31:28. She ran in Rio for 10,000. So she's shown, and she has 10 national titles, she's shown the consistency and the spirit, I guess, to run really well at this level and way beyond it for many, many years.
She still looks very, very good up that little hill. Absolutely nobody in sight at this stage as we pan back to that kind of chase group. The gap just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. She didn't go off hard and look to settle and just kind of hold that gap. She seems to be turning the screw every single lap at the moment. We're probably approaching just under halfway through this race at the moment. Natalie Blomqvist there in third place as well. Finnish athlete. 4:06 1500 meter pit personal best. Wasn't good enough to get her through the heats in Budapest, but given she's an under 23, few years ahead of her, making these world championships and looking forward to the Olympic Games as well in 2024, one would think.
There's a slight gap. The gaps have opened up pretty big, with what, some 11.5 minutes, 12 minutes on the clock. And that's because of this aggressive running of Lati. Yeah, one of the chasing groups coming through. But it makes it a tough day at the races, Matt, doesn't it? You know, I mean, you've probably been in races, and I certainly was many, many years ago, where somebody goes flying off at the start, and you're not sure whether to trying to go with them or to let them go and think they'll come back. But it immediately creates disruption in the minds of the opposition when you effectively, and I've used the phrase before, effectively, as the gun goes, you almost slap them in the face and say, right, this is what I'm going to do today. You didn't know about it, but I did. I've been planning this. I've been thinking about it. I've been talking about it with my coach. And the others are left thinking, crikey, now what? How do I deal with this? And, you know, if they had good coaches, their coach would have said, right, you need to accommodate all possibilities. My old coach is to say, right, have a plan A for your race, but have a plan B as well. And actually, even up your sleeve, have a plan C, because you don't know what's going to be coming at you.
She certainly asked the question of these women as well, and I think they have just fallen into the trap of just running hard the whole way. They haven't had to think too much at this point. They've just kind of given chase. They look to wait around for a little bit, look to their right, look to their left, and say, well, are any of us going to make a move? Are we going to try and hunt her down? I don't think they're going to get anywhere near Lati at this point, but what they can do is just start to create those gaps themselves, and that is what Jana van Lent is doing, the Belgian athlete. Someone else to look out for, Verl Bakker, a little bit further down. Baker in the pack, studied at Portland University, but she's a Dutch 3,000 meter champion. 3,000 meter steeplechase champion, Tim. We spoke about that, steeplechasers. And I think this is a course steeplechasers will enjoy. Yes, we've got the logs. I mean, that's the obvious comparison, isn't it? But also, all these kind of accelerations and decelerations, that is something which you do in the steeplechase. Approaching that water jump, you tend to accelerate into it. So she's up there sitting in about 4th place at the moment. I kind of expect her to perhaps just work her way through to the front of that chase pack. And Tim, she's 15th on the world cross-country rankings. These are new rankings that are scored on meetings like this. This is a silver label IAAF or World Athletics Cross-Country Tour. And but it's not directly from the World Cross-Country Championships that were held, just 9 months ago. So not to be confused.
No, absolutely right. And I like that. I like the idea of a sort of ranking the system that that develops and changes with ups and downs through the season. You know, it's what we get in other sports. You get it in golf, you get it in tennis, and we should have that in athletics, certainly in road racing and cross country. I like the idea of there being accumulating rankings where athletes are rewarded for their endeavors race after race. You know, it's a little bit like that in the Diamond League, where you have to earn your spot in the Diamond League finals, which were obviously last September in Eugene, Oregon, and the Pacific Northwest of the USA. And it's one reason why at those Diamond League finals, I was a bit disappointed, Matt, to see invited runners who hadn't sort of negotiated the trials and tribulations of a Diamond League season stepping in and just having the one-off race maybe, or you know, not having had to earn their place in the finals. I like to see a series of races that athletes have to work at. They support the series as well, which is important for TV audiences and so on. So the cross-country rankings, yeah, I'm absolutely up for it.
Yes, me too. I think the one disappointment about a Diamond League final was the fact it was after the World Championships. It almost, for me, just tainted the World Championships. And so hopefully in the coming years, they put that Diamond League final before the World Championships, and the World Championships is almost the last bit of action we see that year. So we kind of go into the cross-country season or the road season, and we know exactly who the best in the world is. And I think sometimes athletics or track running can shoot itself in the foot. They have so many races. Yeah, you know, the best in the world changes, doesn't it? Every so often, and we see that on the circuit. But yeah, Sarah Lati doing her job up at the front. Tim, I must report that gap 17 seconds, so she increased that gap just 4 seconds on lap 3. So not
I know, massive gap, isn't it, Matt? I mean, 17 seconds, that's about 100 meters now, the speed she's moving at.
It's a huge gap, and more importantly, she's just completely out of sight. If this was round, you know, kind of some grass fields, some grass pitches, I think Jana van Lent could almost gauge that gap and see if it's growing or not. But she has no idea how Sarah Lati is running in front. She has no idea if she's tiring, if she's struggling up the hills or around the turns, because she just simply can't see her at this point in the race.
Yeah, no, exactly. Lati operating at a different level. But Van Lent, well, she's just got to consolidate and you know, try and make sure she makes the roster and try and make sure she can hang on to at least second place. She will be getting information. I guess she'll be having a coach or somebody shouting at her. So she's only 22, Matt, so she's still learning her trade. But I guess she'll be hearing from the sidelines from coaches and maybe family or friends, you know, what's going on in front of her and what's going on behind. And that's important. That sort of accumulating of information that you can put into the computer during a race always helps.
I'll tell you what, Van Lent is having one hell of a race when you look at her, you know, her stats and performances on paper. To put it in comparison, she's 17 seconds behind Lati at this stage in the race, but her 5,000 meter personal best is somewhat a minute and 20 seconds slower. And her half marathon personal best of 77 minutes is almost 10 minutes behind Lati. So she is doing very well to be kind of, yes, she's not hanging on to Lati at this stage in the race, but she is second against some very, very strong opposition, and she's moving away from that opposition with every lap that goes by as well. So
no, you're exactly right. I mean, she won the Belgian 10,000 meter title back in early April, but it was 34:15. So yeah, on paper, she shouldn't have a sniff at Lati. And while Lati has that big lead, she is running out of her skin. She's having a fabulous time. She was only 41st in the European Under-23 Championships in Turin in December last year. But I would suggest that she has moved on very significantly from that level and is actually an athlete who is going to cause a bit of an upset today in terms of her status.
Well, she certainly is. And there she is. Looks like her coach or friend or family member as well on the sideline, really getting after her, cheering her. And that gap, just like Lati's pulling away from Jana van Lent there in second, she is also pulling away from that chase pack behind her as well, as they're just negotiating those logs now. And I think something that Sarah Lati has the advantage, if she knows this course tip, you know, she did it last year. We know she kind of got that course record last year as well, but she's going to know it like the back of her hand, and she was probably planning to come here 2 weeks before that European cross country champs and really kind of run out her skin. She clearly enjoys it. It's clearly she's having a fun time out there, and that is one of the key things. If you're enjoying the race you're in, you're gonna run well, aren't you?
No, absolutely, yeah. And, Lati would have known she was in this sort of form, I guess, Matt. Your training is always a great reinforcer, isn't it? If you're knocking out great sessions, whether it's 3-minute reps on the grass or 1,000 reps on the track, or if it's just a simple fartlek, where you head out for an hour, you do 15 minutes warm up, half an hour of hard efforts in the middle, and then a 15-minute warm down. She would have known her form. I think a lot of athletes, when they've got a certain amount of experience, and she's 28, Lati, she's very experienced, they know almost instinctively what sort of shape they're in, and she's very much on top of her game. I mean, we could be looking at the champion to be crowned in a couple of weeks' time in Brussels.
I think that's a very, very good shout, Tim. As we look, they go through that lap. Lati was through somewhat 24 seconds ago. Jana van Lent is also through for that 4th lap. So they got one more lap to go of this course. I think we know who's going to win it. We haven't got to predict that, but Van Lent as well. She's got a buffer of 20 seconds back to 3rd place. So you suspect him that 1st and 2nd place all but wrapped up, but there is a battle on for 3rd. You've got Bloomquist, Voigt, and Baker all a second apart going into that final lap. So things are going to get interesting for those athletes. You're going to see on the graphic on your screen to give you an indication on those margins as well.
24 seconds down going into the final lap. Jana van Lent behind Sarah Lati. She's turned the screw a little bit more over the last 5 minutes, Matt, because it was 17 seconds the lead she had not long ago. And this is a huge gap she's got now over her pursuer, Sarah Lati. Van Lent, though, well, she has got 20 seconds on Blomqvist, as you say, and Blomqvist in her own little battle with Julie Voigt and Vela Bakker. And then Van der Marel. Merel van der Marel is back in 6th. Van Ackom 7th. Juliet Thomas in 8th. But Juliet Thomas in 8th place. Almost a minute behind. 59 seconds down on this dominant run from the Finn, Sarah Lati.
Well, Tim, it looks like there Verle Bakker is struggling. She looks to be dropped, so we could be into a 2-horse race with Natalie Blomqvist and Julie Voigt in 3rd and 4th. So Finn v Belgian. So the first Dutch athlete, though, is Verle Bakker at the moment. She's in 5th place. She is leading that Dutch National Championships race. But Swede, a Belgian, a Finn, and a Belgian are your top 4 at the moment. Who's going to get 3rd? That's up in the air at the moment. But Lati, no doubt about the winner. Here comes Jana van Lent as well, skipping over those logs. Still looking very, very strong. She is honestly having the race of her life as well.
Always exciting, isn't it, when an athlete gets their training right and steps up through the gears in status and becomes a better runner, or almost emerges like a butterfly from a cocoon and is a different runner to the previous year. And Van Lent, I think, she is only 22, so it's perhaps even more understandable when you're relatively young in your early 20s to come out with that big change. But she is running way, way faster than she's ever run before. It'll be really interesting to see what she produces this coming cross-country season, the rest of it, the European Championships in a couple of weeks. But importantly, too, next summer, where things are a little bit more measurable, I suppose, objectively.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's often the way, isn't it, with athletes, especially in the under-20 and the under-23 age group, is, it takes a cross-country to come to town, like the European Championships, on home soil in Belgium. And she, that was announced a few years ago, and she would have looked at that and she gone, do you know what? I might not be, one of the best now, but can I be in 2-3 years' time when that European cross-country comes to home soil? I'm going to be, an under-23 athlete, perhaps a slightly kind of easier team to qualify for, as opposed to the seniors. So can I get into shape? Can I perform on home soil? And I think she is going to do just that, Jana van Lent. She's leading the way in this Belgian team at the moment. We've got 4 athletes inside the top 10 for Belgium. They've sent quite a few over to prepare for those European cross-country championships. But look at Lati go, cruising through camera. I mean, Tim, I have her about 6 minutes, just over 6 minutes a lap. I think we're going to see a winning time here of 25, 26 minutes. So we've got a couple minutes left of running. She attacks that last hill, perhaps only now, just starting to look a little bit fatigued, Sarah Lati.
Yeah, it's been an astonishing display of front running. Skips over those logs without any trouble at all. She's actually quite tanned up. I I wonder if she has been away warm weather training, maybe Lanzarote, or perhaps she threw in some altitude and went down to North Africa, perhaps Morocco, who knows. She's certainly looking in wonderful shape. And, you know, when you're running on this sort of course, Matt, if you've been putting in good work on the track and in training in the sunshine, it's a real pleasure to come out and turn your legs over really fast. I mean, I suspect she looks like she's in PB shape for 5,000 and 10,000. Never mind about a dominant run on the country. Look at that. The huge gulf between she and her pursuer, Jana van Lent.
Oh, there really is. And that puts it into perspective, doesn't it? You know, these head-on images you can see when they kind of take that right-hand turn, our left. But, you know, on this race as well, to put in perspective how well Sarah Larty is running, there is a qualification standard for this race, and I think that is because they don't want any lapped runners on this course. The laps are quite short. They're under 2 kilometers, and, you know, if you open it up to the masses, if you open it up to everyone, it could get quite messy. You'd have Larty trying to weave her way through lapped runners on what is a very narrow course, so they do have to limit. There's a qualifying standard. I think it's around about 16:30 for these senior women and under 23 women. That's how quick you got to be to get accepted into this race. Hence the kind of compact fields, if you like. But Larty is going to be approaching the finish line. Once we see these ladies turn off, she's probably got about 400 meters, less than a minute of running left, I suspect, Tim.
Well, in which case she is going to threaten her own course record. 26:40 last year. That improved the course record of Anna Emilie Moller of Denmark back in 2019 of 26:48 by 8 seconds. Is she going to lop another big chunk off her own course record here today? It's been the most dominant run of the day, and I think we are looking at an athlete who will definitely make the rostrum come Brussels in 2 weeks' time.
Well, battles going on a little bit further down the field as well. This, in fact, we've had some big movements here over this. For third, I believe, it looks like Juliette Voigt has dropped back a little bit, as well as Verla Bakker. Portland University athlete, studies over in America. Dutch 2000 meter steeplechase champion. I mentioned her before, so we've had some change a little bit further back in this race, but awfully concerned because 26 minutes on the clock. I believe we're going to see Sarah Larty approach the finish. Yes, I'm right. It looks like that is just cutting up, but there she is, Sarah Larty, your victor here at the Tilburg Cross Country, 26:25. Absolutely annihilated the field from gun to tape. There was no question. Nobody was in sight. And Jana van Lent there in second place as well. Let's see what that margin was. Did she close up at all over that last lap? Or did Larty continue to pull away from the field? 32 seconds. So again, Larty just put another 10 seconds on her. Fantastic running from these women as they stream across the line here in Tilburg. We have seen some world-class performances, Tim, as we look ahead now to that European Championships. But it was all changed. Look at that. Van der Marel coming through for third. The Dutch athlete, she came from way back. So a very well-measured race for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, that's not only a massive course record by Sarah Larty. I think we knew that. 26:25. She breaks her own course record from last year by 15 seconds. But that's fantastic running from Van Lent. She's run 26:57. Very few athletes over the years have got under 27 minutes here. So she was dragged to a brilliant run. I mean, conditions are perfect. Maybe they don't get any better than this, and that accounts for the really quick times to some degree. But brilliant running from all these women. As you can see, so many of them stretched to the absolute maximum from the gun by the tactic imposed on them, if you like, by Sarah Larty.
Yeah, they're going to be in a world of pain, aren't they? Perhaps ran a lot harder than they thought they were going to today. But look at these closing images of Sarah Larty getting what she deserved. I think she was probably waiting for this moment, running it over in her head since probably about 5 minutes into this race when she got that gap. But she annihilates her course record, which shows, you know, conditions today maybe even better than they were last year. And there is that Dutch
And she looks very in control in those shots, Matt, doesn't she? Sorry to interrupt. She looks so in control, the Larty. I think there was more in the tank, frankly, don't you?
You'd hope so. And I think, you know, I saw her checking her watch early on, and I think, you know, she'll use this as, yes, a hard run out, but a little bit of a training run, a little bit of tempo run. She's got 2 weeks to those European cross-country champs. She wouldn't have wanted to go flat out today. She'd want to be straight back into training next week before perhaps starting a little bit of taper going into these Euros. But Tim, you're going to be out there commentating on that one. She's going to be one to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's been a real privilege to see her running that. Sarah Lati, 26.25, a course record by 15 seconds unofficially. The caption doesn't say it, but that's what we believe. Jana van Lent, 26.57, brilliant to break 27. Meryl van der Marel, 27.18, some 3 seconds clear to get onto the rostrum ahead of Van Ackom. So, yeah, great racing at the front end. And the performances of those behind her are sort of a little bit shielded by the quality of Lati's run. She is so supreme today, Matt, that the great running of the next half dozen or so is put a little bit in the shade, but they have run fantastically.
Do you know what, Tip? There was a race that unfolded that we didn't get to see too much of because Latte was just streaks ahead of the rest of the field. And, Van der Marel there coming through for third was just phenomenal running. That pack of three, which were a pack of three for so long, I think it was, Natalie Blomqvist in there, Juliette Voigt, and Bakker as well at the Netherlands. They completely faded, and there was a pack behind them that came storming through, and Van der Marel was one of them, as well as Sophie Van Ackom as well of Belgium, and Natalie Blomqvist, who was in third for so much of that race, had to settle for fifth, so being caught by surprise late on. But, that was it for the long courses here. We now move into some very fast and furious action. We're going to have 2 short courses coming up, and seem to have put themselves in the program a lot of these cross-country permit meetings because of that mixed relay, which we're going to see at the European Championships in 2 weeks' time. So athletes will be bidding for a spot to make that Dutch team, no doubt.
Well, hopefully the racing we've seen so far in Tilburg has wetted your lips for the European Cross Country Championships in Brussels, the Spa European Cross Country Championships in Brussels in 2 weeks' time. Do make sure you join us. The 2 short course races yet to come. There's plenty more here from the Warandeloop in Tilburg. The men's short course race is due underway in about 5 minutes' time, and then they'll be followed by the women's short course race. Both of those short and sharp, as you say, Matt, 1,875 metres. They'll only take about 4 or 5 minutes each of those races. They will be really, really quick and unforgiving. A bit like indoor athletics, which is short and sharp, the indoor season, but so exciting. I do love indoor athletics, Matt. We were talking earlier about how it's got its own identity now. It's because of the intensity of it, isn't it? You get a real cauldron effect on those indoor tracks. It's wonderful, and the spectators are that much closer to the athletes as well.
Oh, there is some fantastic atmosphere. It seems to be getting more and more popular, and I'm sure those over in the Netherlands are looking forward to that European Indoor Championships being hosted in 2025. They have got some serious talent on the track now. I mean, Femke Bol is an absolute star. We mentioned Neil Laros as well, and of course Sifan Hassan. So all it takes is a few, isn't it? And the rest will follow.
No, absolutely right. Femke Bol actually voted as European female athlete of the year, wasn't she? Just a little while back, and Jakob Ingebrigtsen, I think, was the male European athlete of the year. That was pretty predictable as well. Both of them are real standout performers. So there's the lap that they will be negotiating. The men's short course race coming up in about 3 minutes' time. Just one large lap. And this effectively a middle distance race. They used to be, just for a few years, the IAAF, as they were then, World Athletics now, the world governing body of the sport, introduced short course races at the World Cross Country Championships. But they were pretty short-lived, weren't they, Matt? I think they were only around for about 5 editions, something like that, when the World Cross Country was held every year. The idea was to try and attract the big middle distance names to cross country, and it sort of died a death. But in the European format, well, it's proven very popular.
Well, I think you say, the short course died a death, and it was to attract those middle distance athletes. I think the problem is the longer distance athletes would just double up, wouldn't they? They'd win the short course on day one and go and win the long course on day two. So I think the middle distance athletes soon got fed up, and it is interesting because I do think with the footing, I mean, this course is particularly firm, so I do think this will suit those track runners. But if it's soft, boggy grass, you know, those athletes that rely on like a really good ground contact time and good bounce off the track do struggle. And I think it does favour those who have a little bit more strength, who perhaps will be better suited to a long course as well. So let's see how it plays out. But Tim, this is going to be awfully technical. It's going to be fast, ferocious. We haven't seen a faller yet today, but will we see one on this short course? Because you cannot afford for any gaps at all to open up. Look here as we just preview this course to start just in a few minutes' time. But you just get a grasp for, one, how firm it is, but two, kind of how twisty it is. This is one of the longer straights, though. So this is where athletes will be able to kind of stretch out and fight for position a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a really good idea, this sort of runner's eye view of the circuit. It'll be slightly speeded up, but it gives you an idea of the number of twists and turns too. And I haven't counted, actually, Matt, the number of twists and turns on each of these 1,875-meter laps. I reckon it's about 15 corners that they have to negotiate. And then you throw in the undulations as well, which also break up your rhythm. There's not much difference in surface anywhere. There isn't really a muddy section, but that's enough. Those two out of three ain't bad, as they say. You know, the twists and the turns and the undulations, surface changes would have been the full set, I suppose. But this is good cross country, a good cross country test, and at the speed these men and women are going to be moving at, Matt, in these short course races, those undulations are going to be really interesting, because you can, if you misjudge your effort, especially over those logs, for example, as well, you really could come a cropper. You could have a problem. You could go down. So I think your running line and the way you negotiate the lumps and bumps makes a huge difference in these short course races, far more so than in the longer races.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the longer races, you also have a little bit more time, don't you, lap on lap, to experience the good line you talk about. Whereas these men, I hope they've, you know, done a course recce. I hope they've walked the course, jogged the course, and really kind of grasped where they are going to try and, you know, take that turn. But it's all good knowing the best line to take, but it's being able to take it as well. There may be a man on your inside, man in front, man behind, and it might be restricted to just taking whatever line there is.
Well, there's the field getting ready for this next event, the men's short course race. It is actually quite a big field, more than I would have liked, I have to say, Matt. For when you think that this is not much more than an English mile, it's a couple hundred meters more than an English mile on the track, 4 laps of the track. So call this 4.5 laps of a running track. And you've got a huge field here, and they're going to be negotiating those twists and turns at a really intense tempo. It's let's just hope they all negotiate this well. I mean, the organisers must have done this before. They know it works, but let's hope it works today, because perhaps the underfoot conditions being so good will mean they go even quicker through to that first corner and through those first few corners, and it will make it tough. It will make it testing. There's plenty of athletes here who've run a long way under 3:40 for 1,500 metres. Rob van Riel amongst them. European Dutch 1,500 champion, rather. This year he's a 3:36 performer. They've just been given a little talking to, I think almost referee style, by the race officials. Let's be sensible, fellas. But we could see quite a bit of shoving and pushing here. And Matt, there are a lot of trees that they skim past, these athletes. So let's hope they get around safely, all of them.
Oh, I think it's going to be absolute chaos this first corner, Tim. As they await these starters' orders.
Gun is up. The penultimate race of the Warandeloop 2023 Festival of Cross-Country Races outside Tilburg. Away they go then. And an intense sprint through to that gap. As you can see, it's a conduit. There's a real bottleneck there after about 70 metres. Who's going to come out on top? You need to have that speed in your legs. It's about 8 across as they head into these slight twists and turns in the early seconds.
Yeah, you don't want to be slow off the line here at all, do you? There's not much time to think. let alone get off the line slowly. But someone we should look out for, Diao Lobles. We saw his younger brother, I believe, in the under-20 race run very, very well for third. But he's an 800-meter national champion. He's a 145 800-meter man. So someone who is going to be okay with a fast start, it's going to be him. Can he hang on? That's going to be the question. It's about 1,000 meters over distance for him. But let's see what he can do as they come around their first turn. So that's the initial long straight done. Now it's going to get twisty for the best part of a kilometre before they get back on a straight and then weave their way into the finish as well. But as you expect, very, very bunched up at this point.
Well, this race distance, Matt, 1875 metres, is almost 2K. You know, 4.5, nearly 5 laps of the track. You'd like to think it's way out of an 800-metre runner's territory, wouldn't you? And it's in the interest of the 1,500 specialists, Rob Van Riel and Rick Van Riel, the two brothers, who have both run very fast 1,500s, to push this on really quickly from the start. They've only been going for a couple of minutes now, and already gaps beginning to open up. Just trying to see who that is coming through in the lead, but he's got a gap, and that's important in this sort of company, Matt. With a field this size, he gets a good clean look at each twist and turn. He can take the best running line, and actually that gap is opening up, I think.
Well, there's one man it might be, and that's Stefan Nielsen. Yeah, under 23, 1,500 meter champion, so he knows going over this sort of distance. You said about the 1,500 runners stepping up, but that gap for me, that's a winnable margin already. This early on in the race, I'm not sure how that's going to be closed. Potentially on that, long straight section, someone could try and close that gap and eats away on him, but that is a massive margin to have after just a kilometre or so. Look, 3 minutes on the clock. We reckon we're going to be about 4.5, 5 minutes of running, just over 5 minutes. He's looking very, very smooth. So if it is Nielsen, he looks very strong, and he's living up to that under 23 title he got earlier on this summer.
Yeah, he's got a big gap, and he's more than 2/3 the way through this race already. Skipping over those logs. They were not so significant in the longer races, but in a race like this, they've become more of a factor. Now, there's a long straight. This is... I've run in road miles, and often it's an optical illusion. It's when you see the far end and you start sprinting, and it just doesn't get any closer for a long time. I wonder if they're going to judge this run right, or if the guys behind him can close down on him. But he looks strong. He's a big fella, isn't he? He's well muscled in the legs. He's looking very, very smooth indeed, and he will be getting information shouted at him from the sidelines, I'm sure, Matt, as he heads towards the finish. Now, 4 minutes on the clock. He's literally got about a minute to go.
Well, and another man that we should mention is Nick Marsman, 3,000 meter steeplechase Dutch champion. It goes in this one, but he's also the short course cross-country course champion. That was back in February, that race. He's got a 3:41 1,500 PB. So that's someone, he's got all the credentials to enjoy this race. So we'll check in and see if it is Marsman, Nick Marsman. Just a little stumble around that turn, a little slip for the man up front, though. But we're going to get a split view any minute now, so we should be able to identify them into this finishing straight. But I said that's a winnable margin, Tim, as soon as he got that gap, and it looks to be just closing up a little bit, those two behind, but it's actually Bram Anderson in first place at the moment, and Nick Marsman is in second. So the steeplechase champion in second place, the short course cross-country champion in second, but Anderson, Tim, is going to win this one comfortably in the end.
Well, 3:36 1,500 meter man has dominated this one. Looks easy. He's able to ease off there. Look at the contrast. Those behind him sprinting for the line. Andreasen taking it just outside 5 minutes. Really, really quick running. Intense stuff. He nearly came a cropper. 5:11, that winning time. He nearly came a cropper with about 20 seconds to go as he hit one corner and nearly went off course. But there is the confirmation of the result of the top finishers. Andreasen winning by 3 seconds from Marsman and Ward Lunkens of Belgium. Bram van Druten just missing the rostrum by 1 second. They're really tight margins, as you'd expect, amongst the top 8.
Yeah, it's not much room to open up. But saying that, they're reasonably big margins for how short the race was. We saw similar margins in that senior men's race, didn't we? Was it Elias FIFA kicking all the way, just getting out kicked by the Norwegian in that one? Less than a second separating them. But yeah, Bram Andersen, what a race. He's Well, he just had the tactic right. He stole the march on the rest of the field. I think that's what you've got to do over this distance. You have to kind of, if you're going to break away, make it convincing and, let those behind you try and give chase, try and close that gap. Because to be honest, there's not many opportunities to get some good running in and really accelerate. And I think that's the thing. There's almost a speed limit to how quick you can get around that course. No matter how fast you are over 1500 or on the flat, I don't think you can go that quick just because of all the twists and the turns.
No, absolutely right. It's weird actually because I can think back to prior to the introduction of these short course races in cross country, and it would have been unheard of because cross country, going back in the day, was always a discipline where you prepared with stamina and strength and agility to negotiate lots of corners and things. But for these middle distance fellas, it must be a really weird stepping out of their norm. An indoor track is a consistent surface, consistent bends, an outdoor track likewise. But cross country and moving at that speed at an almost 4-minute 1500 meter pace for 5 or 6 minutes in over undulations and twists and turns and the slightly muddy surface, very, very testing indeed. Intense stuff for these fellas. I wonder how many of them train for that as opposed to training for the indoor circuit. Do you do really hard, fast 3-minute reps with twists and turns? I don't think many people do.
I think this is something which we'll see over the next few years is we'll find athletes will be training specifically for short courses. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if many people do train specifically for it at the moment. And I think that's simply because it's probably not enough races to justify or warrant specializing in this discipline. But I think with the rise of these short course races and the mixed relay and international vests on the line, I think athletes are going to start to as soon as track season's done, almost look to carry that form into the winter and mix it up, get creative with their training because on a course like this you really do need to be able to negotiate those turns at speed.
No, absolutely, but. Just the women's race to come, the women's short course race to come. That's due off at 90 minutes past the hour. That's in just a couple of minutes' time. But Brahman Diriasen, very, very impressive. They're winning by 3 seconds, the 24-year-old Dutchman. He had a good summer, setting his season's best. Actually, way back in May, couldn't improve upon the 3:40.5 he ran in Walnut, California. He's got a reasonable strength, Matt. 49-minute 10-miler. 7:55 indoors for 3,000. So he's a very worthy winner on the day, and conditions remain really kind for these athletes. The underfoot conditions absolutely superb, and not a hint of any wind. It makes you wonder if any wind ever gets into the middle of this forest because it's so dense.
It's lovely, and I'm sure the purists in our sport, this is a venue I think athletes would love to train on as well. They love to get off road. They love to, run where it's quiet, where nobody is. Get the miles in on soft surfaces underfoot. But here we are then. Last race of the day. This women's short course about to get underway. We are just a minute or so away from this race starting. So a lot smaller field than that men's race. So I don't expect the start to be quite as chaotic. I think it would be just as aggressive, but a little bit more room for these women to breathe and negotiate that first turn. And will we see a decisive move? Will we see someone run away from it gun to tape? There's a few athletes to look out for. Jens van Kampen, Dutch 5K road champion in 2023. She's got a 1500 personal best of 4:10. So that is right up there amongst the best in Holland at the moment. Of course, you've got Sifan Hassan. Not here today, but she actually won that short cross-country championships, which perhaps is the best indication of how she fares over these shorter cross-country races. Was that Dutch title back in February?
Well, there were 24 entries for this race. Looks slightly fewer on the line there, maybe about 20, something like that. Your finger was held up about 30 seconds ago to say 1 minute to go, ladies, by the officials who have done a wonderful job. Big shout out for them. Big thank you to the officials as this last race of our program, the last race of the day, is about to get underway.
Well, the starter about to raise his gun for the final time today here in Tilburg, right next to Tilburg University grounds. It's been a fantastic 3-day event. This is the
clock, bottom right of your screen, still ticking away the men's time. By the way, I need to refresh that. I like this shot, Matt. The camera work's been great. I like the shot over the starter's shoulder with a gun held aloft.
Absolutely. As we patiently wait, but away they go then. Fast start, aggressive into that first turn. They'll look for a separation. They'll look for a little bit of breathing room against each other. The final race of the day here at the Warandeloop cross country. It's a famous historic cross country, as we know. And look at this start. Well, this is reminding me of Sarah Larty in the senior women's long course race, Tim. But we've got an aggressive leader straight to the front. No messing around already.
No, absolutely. Shades of Bram Andreasen and the Dutchman who won that men's race in 5:11 by 3 seconds. These women, of course, will be a little bit slower, maybe 30 seconds or slower. But wow, they have gone for it in the early stages. Apologies if you're experiencing breakup of pictures as that field gets underway on the short start straight. Interesting one when the starter is just standing in the middle of the start straight. Norman, my experience is always for the starter to be off the course, but hey, as long as the ladies can see him and avoid him.
Well, this is it. I think, you often saw the starter trying to scramble away as well, but he certainly doesn't have time for that. But we've just like in that men's race a few minutes ago, then we got a nice margin there of around about 10 meters back to second place. A big old pack of athletes to crown off the top 10 as well. So this is about a quarter of the way through this first and only lap for these women in this short course race.
Yeah, again, they're being led at a merry dance by an athlete. We'll identify the athlete in front as soon as we can. But single file already with only 2 minutes on the clock in this short course race for the women on this flat, fast circuit. It actually lends itself to aggressive front running, doesn't it? Because the athletes don't have to twist and turn. They can get into a good, fast rhythm really early on, Matt, on this sort of circuit.
You're exactly right. It looks awfully dark, doesn't it, through this tunnel of trees on this section of the course. And, well, it's not quite nightfall in Tilburg, but not too far away. But that gap has just opened as well for me, Tim. I mean, there's no questions that, again, it's a winning margin at this stage. We're over probably halfway through this race. Looks convincing up front. It is thinning out behind her as well. These ladies strung out, so perhaps a little more strung out than that men's race, but no doubt about the winner. This is the testing part of the course. How you negotiate this hill. You're up it. You're straight down at the other side as well. So you do short stride, pump the arms, and you really have to accelerate, not put the brakes on the other side. Accelerate off it and let those give chase behind.
Well, apologies for our not being able to identify these front runners. The big numbers are not massive, and it really is hard with some of these pictures to give you the names that we would like to do. Matt and I both working to prepare bios on so many of these athletes, but if you can't ID them, it does become a commentator's nightmare, to coin a phrase.
I have a feeling, though, Tim, it could well be Van Kampen up front. She's, the 5,000 meter road champion. She looked on paper the best in the field by a country mile, so I'd be surprised if it's not her. But yeah, like I said, she won that short course cross-country race earlier on in the year in February, so it could well be Jex Van Kampen, who is just establishing herself as a short course specialist. We talk about the rise of this event and win your national championship. She's here until bidding her spot. She could be a key member of that quartet in 2 weeks' time, when they go to Brussels and looks to compete against the best teams in Europe, the best nations in Europe. But what a runaway victory this is. And I could say a victory. I'm confident, Tim. I know commentator's curse exists, but I'm pretty sure that she is going to take this one.
Yeah, I think you're right, because that is a big lead she's got now. 4.5 minutes on the clock. She's only got about a minute and a half, maybe a minute of running to come. And giving no quarter whatsoever. When you can impose yourself on a field like this, not give them a sniff at competing with you from the off. Again, it's that sort of hammer blow over the first 10 or 20 seconds when they all go, wow, she is blown away with this. And there's not a lot you can do. You know, if you get a little bit of warning psychologically, more than physically, for that sort of start from the blocks, then you can accommodate it a little bit. But when you have no warning and it comes out and bang, and it sort of punches you in the face, then there's little you can do. And she's grabbed that advantage in the first minute. She grabbed 20, 30 meters or more, and she's gone.
Well, I have had confirmation it is definitely Van Kampen up front at the moment, and she's dominated this. She dominated the short course earlier on in the year, the Dutch short course, and she is just flying around this 1,875-meter circuit. She's enjoying every moment of it. We're going to have a race here for second, Tim, as well. Lana Rijkaard and Dagmar Smit in second. Dagmar Smit, I'll let you know, sick at that short course earlier on, that Dutch short course back in February. So she's running a bit better here. She's bidding for a spot, believe it or not, on that quartet for the European Championship. So if she can hang on to that position, there's a whole flock of Dutch athletes hunting her down as well. But Lana Rijkaard is a Belgian athlete in second place, running well. Can she get amongst, or can she hang on to that silver medal, shall I say? But Van Kampen then, here she comes down the finishing straight. Just like Sarah Latti in the senior women's long course race, she's won this gun to tape. No questions asked of her. She'll be excited for what's to come in 2 weeks' time, I'm sure, as the rest of them flock in. Lana Rijkaard, 12 seconds back. Dagmar Smit, the Dutch athlete. That could be your two females on that Dutch team in Brussels. But as we get a little replay then here of Van Kampen just up this climb, the one testing part of this course, bar, of course, all the twists and turns and the log. But yeah, the steepest incline over and down the other side within a matter of seconds. Well, there you have it, Tim. The women's short course race all but wrapped up.
Yeah, but a 12-second winning margin, perhaps relatively speaking, the most dominant race of the day. And we've seen a few, Matt, so that is quite some accolade. But Jessica Van Kampen, 5:51 winning 5:51 and winning by 12 seconds from Lana Rijkaard. And Dagmar Smit a further 4 seconds back in third. Great, though, that these athletes were able to sharpen up for Brussels. Many of these athletes we've seen in the various races today will be appearing in Brussels. Those Spa European Cross Country Championships in exactly 2 weeks' time today. And I know many of you will want to join us for the coverage of those races. Let's hope the weather is half as kind as it's been today and we don't see cooler temperatures, rain, wind, or even snow come the gathering in the Belgian capital.
All to look forward to in 2 weeks' time. And, of course, the World Cross Country in the turn of the new year as well. I think that's going to be late March, early April even. We've got some fantastic endurance is on the rise. Valencia Marathon as well next weekend. So a whole host of events to look forward to as we recap what was a special day here in Tilburg on the mud on this twisty, winding, forestry cross-country circuit, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to pick out the performance of the day, Matt, as we see, again, a promotion for those Spa European Cross Country Championships in Brussels, where the racing will be even more fast and fierce than it's been today. My performance of the day, though, I think, Matt, has to go to Sarah Latti, the winner of that senior women's race. Her performance was an improvement by quite some margin over her own course record from last year. Superb stuff from Latti. She came home in 26:25, lopping 15 seconds off her own course record from 12 months ago. The Swede was quite supreme, and that is to stand out from the winners today. That is quite something.
I'm looking forward to seeing her in 2 weeks' time in Brussels. She is cementing herself as one to watch. We'll get, as of course, this is a weekend where a lot of countries will be hosting their national championships as well. We'll start to see who is going to contest that European Cross Country Championships, who is going to step on that start. And obviously, we mentioned Jakob Ingebrigtsen withdrawing already due to an injury. But the European Indoor Championships 2025 going to be back here in the Netherlands, Apeldoorn to be precise. But thank you very much for tuning in at this Warandeloop historic cross-country meeting, Silver World Athletics Cross-Country Continental Tour. few remaining words from Tim before we wrap up.
Well, not much more to say, Matt, really. Great racing, really good organisation. Big thank you to the organisers for today's fantastic Warandeloop racing festival in the forest outside Tilburg. It's been a good day, and I think European middle and long distance running is in rude health. Great that the athletes have got not to travel too far to find well organised events, and today was a fine example of that. And really looking forward to Brussels now that gathering of the best of the continent in 2 weeks' time over cross country. Matt, I'll leave it to you to wrap and say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed. Here, Matt Seddon, your commentator today, alongside the famous and legendary Tim Hutchings. We look forward to next time. Have a great Sunday afternoon.